Testing for the online streaming. Test 1, 2, 3. Mayor, could you give us just one more minute? Mayor, we are good to go again.
All right, it's 3:48 and we are still on the open call to the public. Thank you so much for your patience, Dapper Dre.
Just want to open with a quick moment of silence for Joanna Wheaton, who passed away May 28, 2021. Thank you for joining me. 3 years, 3 years, here we are, and we get to see where we are. For me, personally, I get to see that I can do some of the stuff that I used to. I'm back in the community the way that I normally used to show up and want to show up. And yet we see where our community is from that. What have we gotten from those 3 years? What have we gotten from this tragedy? We got a pilot bike program, highly contentious, probably not the most engineeringly sound or thought out in full capacity. And we just recently got a lowering of a speed limit, which is a sign and a hope. We still don't have a lot of infrastructure. Again, paint is not infrastructure, and we continue to default to that. We can't somehow figure out how to spend some of the money to make bicycle and pedestrian amenities not just safer, but more inviting and comfortable. If you want this big shift to happen, if you want these carbon neutrality goals to happen by 2030, if you want this climate emergency to have any sense of progress or addressing, then we do need infrastructure that says we actually care about that thing, which is people walking, which is people biking, which is less car dependence. I read all your plans for the future of downtown, plans for neutrality or carbon neutrality, sustainability, all those things. They all say less car dependence, less car dependence. And yet we never take away, we never inconvenience cars. It's always level of service, level of service. And we continue to always cater to the most dangerous thing. The reason people are dying on streets, the reason people die because of traffic violence, if you look at all that data, you're going to see that it's mostly cars are hitting each other, are hitting outside pedestrians, outside cyclists, and yet we can never seem to want to inconvenience cars. We always will give them $100 million to build Lone Tree. We will give them $75 million to build Beulah Roundabout. We'll complain about how Milton needs to be faster, Butler needs to be faster. And yet let's protect, defend be proactive about continuing to sustain some of our walking, some of our biking. We have a very tight corridor of pedestrianism in downtown from the hospital to North Campus. Let's defend it. Let's put in some money. Let's try to do something than what we normally do, which is always, always, always just default to cars. Let's try something different. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving down to item number 7, May work anniversaries.
Mayor, I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions regarding the draft agenda.
Yes. Item number 5, council review of the June 4th agenda. Sorry that I missed that. No questions, no comments. All right. Now moving down to item number 7, May work anniversaries.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Shannon Anderson, one of your deputy city managers. Today before you, we're going to celebrate those employees who experienced a work anniversary during the month of May. We'll start with our first year anniversaries. You'll see some folks here from community development, from pros, from sustainability, management services. So a lot of great employees celebrating their first year here with the city. Moving on, some police employees, as well as our own Deputy City Manager, Joanne Keene. Later this week, we'll celebrate her first anniversary. And then a couple more, again, in community development, and then with our municipal court, one of our on-call magistrates. So exciting to see so many employees on their first year, now moving on to 5 years. Our first is Sarah Langley, again, working upstairs as our public affairs director. So excited for Sarah to reach this 5-year moment. Also Marty Gidley, he works for Public Works and Streets. We've got Chanel Preston. She's one of our officers with our Flagstaff Police Department. Stephen Anderson is one of our library clerks in the Economic Vitality Division, also celebrating 5 years. Clint Stewart, another one of our officers, celebrating 5 years. And then jumping to 15 years, David Botts, he works for our library in information technology, part of our Economic Vitality Division. Moving on to 20 years, Nicholas Jacobellis is one of our police sergeants, celebrating his 20th year with the city. And then we have one employee who's 25 years or longer with the city. This is Tyrone. Tyrone's with us today. So I'll tell you a little bit about him, and then if he wants to come up and say anything, he's welcome to do so. So this comes from his coworkers. They say that words mentor, patience, community, gratitude, connection, but most of all coach, are just a few words that describes Tyrone. He's a colleague to many at the city of Flagstaff. With the last 25 years, he's focused in recreation. It's not just about recreation, but his impacts are felt through the organization and the community daily for everyone. His institutional knowledge is expansive through his time spent in recreation. He's a connecting individual for all of us in pros, and they rely on his patience and community first mantra. Helps them work through some of the complexities that serving our public can entail. There's no challenge that Coach T would say no towards. Instead, you can just expect a yes. We'll figure that out. So some highlights of his career with the city include working in athletics, recreational programming for the youth in our community, facility management and oversight, and of course, leading a team of amazing individuals that create memories at our 4 recreation centers each and every day. We're blessed to get the opportunity to work with Tyrone and look forward to many more years so that we can all learn and grow with him. Congratulations, Tyrone. It's so nice to have him here. I'm going to turn it over to him. Thanks, Tyrone.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I just want to say that I'm very appreciative for the position that I have here with the City of Flagstaff. It started for me as a youth, just really going to Coddale Recreation Center and having Joe Joyce as my mentor. And then when I had the opportunity to actually take his position and place, I wanted to continue what he was doing and really work with the youth and the kids, and that grew to the community. And along the way, I've been able to work with so many just great people in terms of my coworkers, supervisors. And now that I'm in a different position, I've stayed like as a supervisor for 20 plus years now. That I'm at the rec manager, I'm just enjoying learning more and growing, and look forward to continuing to do that. And so thank you for this time and for this recognition. And yeah, look forward to, I don't know, many more years, but at least a few more years. Thank you.
That's all we have for you today. We'll be back with you in June to celebrate the next month of anniversaries. Thanks.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate the work that you put into recognizing all of our employees. It's great for us to see faces with names and to better understand just the longevity that a lot of our staff has with the city. So thank you. All right, moving down, review and discuss procurement code manual amendment to revise Article 4 definitions and add a new Article 32, sustainable procurement. Hello.
Hello. There it goes. Come on. Show me the slideshow. From beginning. There we go. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council members. I'm Patrick Brown, your Purchasing Director. It's good to see you guys again. Tonight, I'm going to be talking to you about a proposed amendment for some revisions to the Procurement Code Manual. In particular, some revisions to Article 4, which are definitions, and they directly pertain to the other portion of the amendment revision, which is adding a new article to the Procurement Code. So for a quick overview, we're going to talk about a resolution for an amendment to revise the Procurement Code Manual. In a prelude, I'm going to give you a little bit of more detail just to keep you enticed and on the edge of your seat. Staff recommended revisions for Article 4. We'll talk about those. Those, again, are all definitions. Staff recommended new addition of Article 32, which is specific to sustainable procurement. And so we thought that it was such an important topic, we made it its own article in the Procurement Code Manual. But for tonight, we're going to talk specifically about subsection 32.1, which pertains specifically to the purchasing of financial services under the sustainable procurement. And then I'll present to you 3 options for council to consider and give direction on. And then we'll talk about future revisions and amendments. All right, so the proposed amendment, there's new definitions, the article subsection to the procurement code, which is 32.1 for financial services, and the amendment options 4 are going to be under sub-article 32.1B. So there's going to be an A, which is not part of the options, it's just part of the preamble to what we're going to do. but it's going to be B in particular. And again, there's 3 options. So let's look at the definitions. So Article 4 definitions, we're proposing adding some definitions to the Procurement Code Manual. First one is direct fossil fuel relationships, which means companies that fund operations and companies associated with extracting, producing, and investing in fossil fuels. Financial services means contractual services with businesses that manage money, including banking services, deposits, treasury management, credit card payment services, and loans and leases. Fossil fuel industry means the sector involved in the exploration, extraction, production, and distribution of fossil fuels. These fuels include coal, oil, and natural gas. And that's important later on when we look at the options. We ask for type of fossil fuel. This is what we're talking about. Let me catch up to myself. Okay. Next one is fossil fuel adjacent companies, which means businesses that operate closely with or provide services to a fossil fuel industry, but are not directly involved in the exploration, extraction, production, and distribution of fossil fuels themselves. These companies may include suppliers of equipment and technology used in fossil fuel extraction, transportation, and refined processes, as well as firms engaged in activities such as exploration, environmental remediation, consulting, or finance tailored specifically to the fossil fuel sector. And then finally, we have indirect fossil fuel industry relationships, which means companies that fund companies, that those companies themselves have exposure to fossil fuel investments. So in some way they have exposure and are involved in it. Any questions about definitions before I move on? All right. So now we get to the add. This is where we add Article 32 called Sustainable Procurement. We propose this new article for all of sustainable procurement, and it starts off with the City of Flagstaff recognizes the importance of focusing procurement processes on sustainable purchasing practices. All procurements will require consideration of the following sub-articles. So that's setting it up for later, adding more sub-articles for sustainable procurement for whatever we're talking about later on. But for this exercise and this amendment, we're talking about Section 32.1, Financial Services. When procuring financial services, the purchasing agent will follow the prescribed process below related to the relationships with fossil fuel industry. And that's where B comes in. And B has the 3 options that I was telling you about. So let's move to those options. Option 1. So I want to preface this with Option 1 and Option 2 are evaluative criteria. So basically, these are evaluative criteria that will be in solicitations specifically to assess points and evaluate a proposal. So Option 1 is objective, measurable, and competitive. So this one says, when procuring financial services through a competitive process, the following evaluative criteria will be included in the solicitation regarding the relationship between the firm and the fossil fuel industry. Evaluation criteria are determined by the purchasing director and the end user or city treasurer. Evaluation criteria shall be objectively measurable and allow for the evaluation, selection, and award of a contract in the best interest of the city. Lesser direct business relationships with the fossil fuel industry will provide a higher point value. Demonstration of approach to limiting future direct involvement with fossil fuel industries will be considered. So the less you get, the less you're involved with fossil fuel, the more points you get. All solicitations advertised shall include the evaluation criterion business with the fossil fuel industry as follows, and this is the criteria for Option 1. Financial institutions with greater relationships with the fossil fuel industry will be assessed lower point value. Financial institutions showing a commitment to climate action, carbon neutrality, and reducing relationships with fossil fuel industry may gain higher point values. Financial institutions doing business with the City of Flagstaff must provide documentation showing their involvement with the fossil fuel industries. So the more you're involved, the less points you get. The more you're involved in the reduction of fossil fuels and carbon neutrality, the more points you get. Okay, relationships with fossil fuel industry. Explain your institutional involvement with the fossil fuel industry. 2, describe the fossil fuel industry that you currently provide financing. Financing. Provide a list of your current financing by type and amount. Again, there's that type I told you about earlier. Commitment to climate action, and this is where we draw that out. Share your institution's commitment to climate action and reduction of investment in the fossil fuel industry. Include any initiatives your company has for reducing carbon emissions and how long the initiatives have been in place, as well as financing towards green energy. For example, solar, wind, etc., those kind of items. Please provide at least 2 years of progressive reports or progress reports towards carbon emission reductions. And provide your company's initiatives to provide financing for fossil fuel industry. That's option 1. We're moving on to option 2 unless you want to halt me and ask a question.
Councilmember House, then Councilmember McCarthy.
I just had a quick question on the, if you can go back, I think just one slide.
Okay, let me figure out how to go back now. There.
Okay. So in those first 2 sentences where it says that those with greater relationships with the fossil fuel industry will be assessed a lower point value, and then in the next it says that those with those commitments may gain a higher point value. Is there just
in reducing fossil fuel.
Right.
Right.
So is there a difference between the assertion of one will receive lower points and one may receive higher points?
The assertion is that it depends on how much they're doing in there. So they may receive, if it's something minuscule, they may not receive higher points, right? But if they're doing great work in that arena, they may get higher points. It just depends on how much of that they're doing in both categories.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you. Stay on that slide, please. Last item, number 2, second sentence. It says, provide a list of your current financing by type and amount. So you basically want a list of companies that they support or give loans to or whatever. I think that's kind of an overreach to ask a bank or whoever to say, give me a list of your customers and how much business you do with them. To me, it's an overreach. Comment, please.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. We have had evaluative criteria in the past where we've asked for financial information to help determine award or to assess points, part of pricing and approach. In this instance, we're just asking for, we're not asking for great detail. We're asking to give us a list of who they are and how much they are and what's the type. So it's not anything that's deep or extensive.
Well, if I were a company, I would say, mind your own business. I just actually wonder if it's legal to even ask such a question. Or maybe it's legal, but I just wonder if it's appropriate to ask them for a list of the companies that they do business with.
Well, I think that maybe it's appropriate in the exercise of us trying to determine their involvement with the fossil fuel industry. It's relevant to what we're doing. I could see it not being appropriate if we were talking about something completely different. But here we're trying to assess what their involvement is in the fossil fossil fuel industry. So asking that kind of question or asking that of them is very pertinent to what we're trying to do with this evaluative criteria.
Whatever.
City Manager and then Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Patrick, thank you for this presentation. I wanted to take an opportunity and jump on the question posed by Councilmember House, because I'm not so sure that you understood the question, or at least want to give you an opportunity to elaborate. I believe her question is focused on the paragraph here in this slide. The first part of it is mandatory. It's a mandatory increase or a lower point value, pardon me. It's a mandatory deduction in point value for institutions that have relationships with the fossil fuel industry. The second sentence appears to be discretionary, that being a potential increase in value for those institutions that are able to establish, carbon neutrality and so forth. So one is mandatory, the other is discretionary, and I think that is the nature of the question. Why is there, and I just want to again invite you to elaborate upon this, why one would be a firm requirement or outcome and the other one would be discretionary. Thanks.
Thank you, City Manager. And I understand the question a little bit better now. Thank you. So we can certainly make both to be coincidental with each other, it being will instead of may. That is a revision we can make.
Councilmember Harris?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation so far. So I have a what if. So what if a company or an organization, a bank or whoever, is in the process of doing some type of business, whether that's putting a deal together, whether that's getting ready to do financing, whatever it is that they're trying to do, and they don't want that information public. So that company or that organization, too bad, too sad, because we want your public, we want your information, and we want you to disclose all your private stuff to us because we want you to maybe bid for whatever service that we have. And if they don't, they always have the choice not to do it. That's right. Just the way it is. But it seems like that's kind of short-sighted.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. That would be something they would not want to disclose. We do have in all of our solicitations an area for, it's required forms, if you will, where we ask them to provide us what information they want to be kept confidential. So all that information stays confidential with us. If there's a public records request, it gets blacked out when we provide whatever's asked for. So it is not disseminated to the public at all. It is just kept within the city of Flagstaff for review.
I'm not an expert, and I probably watch way too much television, but industrial espionage and all of those other kinds of things that I have no clue about happen all the time. And so I just feel for any company that's being put in a precarious situation like that, because we really can't guarantee that no one in our organization is going to say anything to anybody else. We really can't.
Right. So, I mean, we could, most likely they'll reach out to us anyway with that concern, and we could discuss with them possibly putting vague information in there, as long as we know it helps us make a decision to the fact that they are going to be doing business with these other companies, whether it's supporting a fossil fuel industry or not, or a wind farm or something like that. They don't have to disclose those details if they are very strict about the confidentiality, but enough information to provide us so that we know that that's there.
Two things. I'm guessing that in order to ask for something to be redacted or not made public, there has to be some sort of legal parameters around that, right? You can't just say, I don't want anything in my application visible to the public.
Well, they could say that if they wanted to, and we would have to redact it. Our legal team here, they review all that and determine, okay, of this information, what really is confidential and what isn't. But if they ask, if ABC company says, we don't want any of this disseminated, we won't disseminate it.
And these amendments, these are just specific to the banking industry, right?
Correct.
So we're not talking about like secret ingredients and anything. This is strictly banking.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Option 2. Okay. So this one's going to read very similar to what you just heard, but there's a caveat in it with adding on more to it. So in this one, the financial institutions with greater relationships with the fossil fuel industry and fossil fuel adjacent companies, so we added that in there, fossil fuel adjacent companies will be assessed lower point value. So the added part is that adjacent company. Financial institutions showing a commitment to climate action, carbon neutrality, and reducing relationships with fossil fuel industries, and we're changing this to will gain higher point value. Financial institutions doing business with the city of Flagstaff must provide documentation showing their involvement with the fossil fuel industries. So we're asking for 1, explain your institutional involvement with the fossil fuel industry and fossil fuel adjacent companies. List industries, their business and length of association. Describe the nature of your institution's association. And provide a list of your current financing by type and amount. Let me get down there. My apologies. And commitment to climate action. Share your institution's commitment to climate action and reduction of investment in the fossil fuel industry. Include any initiatives your company has for reducing carbon emissions and how long the initiatives have been in place, as well as financing towards green energy such as solar and wind. Please provide at least 2 years of progress reports towards carbon emission reductions. Provide your company's initiatives to reduce financial or financing for fossil fuel industry and fossil fuel adjacent companies. And that's option 2. Any questions or concerns?
Councilmember Harris.
Okay, so my question now is related to option 1 and 2. Do we know if there are organizations out there who meet this criteria right now?
I personally don't. I think our sustainability group does, and they have been instrumental in helping to build this. Mm-hmm. So I believe they have seen and have identified that.
So we have identified organizations, banking organizations who fit our criteria 1 and 2, option 1 and 2. And if so, how many?
I am not going to speak for
okay.
it, so I'll let
all right.
you do that.
That's fine.
There you go.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Nicole Antonopoulos, Sustainability Director. And thank you for the question, because this is something that has been coming up while doing a lot of research to be here this afternoon. With that in mind, there are clearinghouses that are representing financial institutions that have committed to not having any dealings with the fossil fuel industry. So there are third-party certifications. The last check, which I believe was on Thursday, there are at least 3 lending institutions in the state of Arizona that would qualify.
So we have 3 lending institutions in the state of California, did you say, or Arizona?
Arizona.
Arizona. And they meet criterias in option 1 and 2, correct? All right, and so those organizations, do you know who they are, and can we know who those organizations are?
Absolutely, and we'd be happy to send an email with a direct link to that third-party verification, and then it lists out all the lending institutions around the country that have enrolled and made a commitment to fossil-free investments.
And how reliable is that third-party information?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Okay. All right, basically, can we trust that what they're telling us is correct?
The agency that is leading this initiative is investigating, so any financial institution that submits their name to be considered as verified has to fill out and provide information and proof that they are not dealing with the fossil fuel industry.
So then basically, if we don't like either one of those three, for whatever reason, too bad, too sad, we're stuck with them, correct? According to our, okay, then answer.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, Rick Taylor, Management Service Director and City Treasurer. I think we're getting in between the option 3 and option 1 and 2 from what information Nicole was talking about. Any bank, I think, can reply to an RFP and fit option 1 and option 2 and demonstrate their direct association or indirect association with the fossil fuel industry, and they can demonstrate how they're moving climate action. So for 1 and 2, I think any bank would be available to bid on the services. When we get to option 3, that is where the restriction really comes in as far as what banks are green banks or what have you. I have not personally identified any at this time, but I understand that Nicole may have done some research that I was not aware of. But can they provide the services we need? We don't know that either until we do an RFP. But for option 1 and 2, I think any bank could possibly apply for. They just may not get the full points, right? And they got other points to.
And then, so then we'll take whoever has the highest number of points, right? Whatever that might be.
We'll go through the procurement process, okay. Maybe identify the top 2, 3 bankers, do interviews, and we'll go further with what banks we want to go for.
And I'm going to ask one last question right now, and I may come back later, Madam Mayor, and have some other questions, if that's okay. So the last question that I'm going to ask right now is that if they cannot provide the services that we need, so they get, maybe they get, I don't know, say we got 100 points, and they can come in and maybe they give us, the highest points are 50, but they can't provide all the services that we need. What do we do?
You want to answer? Give a shot. I'll follow up with you. Councilmember Harris, so if they can't provide all the services we've asked for in the solicitation, so if we ask for these services and they can't provide them, we won't do business with them. If they don't provide us everything we ask for, they could be deemed non-responsive by not responding to our request for information.
So I lied. I do have a follow-up question. Then what do we do? If they can't provide the services that we want, what do we do?
So that's kind of a tricky place because we could either go to the next highest scoring. So what Rick was saying about the scoring, they can get more points. There's going to be other evaluative criteria in that RFP that would drive.
Yeah.
Part of it is what they're able to do.
Yep. And I totally understand that. I really do understand the procurement process.
Okay. So we would go to the next highest scoring firm.
Okay.
And if I can add, we want a full banking services. We don't want to be piecemealing our transactions and creating a lot of inconsistencies and so forth. So we're going to want the best all-inclusive banking services. It's hard to say what we'll get in evaluations, but if we get 98% of it, we may move forward and look to procure a service for that missing piece in a different way. If we only get 50% of it from one bank or another, we may be back in front of council saying, this didn't work for this procurement, and look for direction moving forward. That may be something that comes forward, but we don't know until we actually put it out on a street and do the procurement. But there's a concern.
Vice Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So just a clarification for my for my own education, I just want to be sure that I understand this. These amendments that we're talking about are not they're not deal breakers. It's just part of the scoring mechanism that we use to look at them in the whole suite of services and characteristics that we want out of the institutions we partner with.
Okay, I wanted you to finish your sentence. Vice Mayor, so for options 1 and 2, that is correct. We're just evaluating them on this one piece. Option 3 is a yes or no, make or break.
So I see this as all else being equal. If they also provide these sustainability services, they're going to get a lift in the weighted average of how they're looked at.
Correct.
Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you, Mayor. If you don't mind, I'm going to wait until after option 3 to ask my question.
Okay. Councilmember McCarthy.
I'm trying to sort out the difference between option 1 and option 2. Does option 2 have the provide a list of your current financing, blah, blah?
So it has provide your company's initiatives. So that's the commitment. Let me go back.
So maybe the previous slide would answer this question.
Let me take a look at the previous slide. So provide a list of your current financing by type and amount. Item 4. What's that?
So then basically what is the difference between 1 and 2? Because the provide a list, I guess that's in both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the difference between 1 and 2?
So 2, we're asking for more than just who's providing the proposal. And we're asking for those that they fund who also may have something in the industry, in a fossil fuel industry. So ABC company, it's the financial institute, they fund XYZ company for something, but that company, they may not be funding them for fossil fuel exploration or production, but that company, XYZ, does have dealings with fossil fuel industry in other directions, or they provide investments as well. So we're going down another layer to include those companies that are funded by financial institutions, their involvement.
So which one is the more comprehensive or more restrictive?
So 1 and 2 would be more restrictive because now we're going farther down to include others.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we're on option 3 now. Okay, so on to option 3, which is direct exclusion, but it's clear and concise. And this is the one I want to note that this is not an evaluative criteria. This is if you do business, you're non-responsible. If you don't, you're responsive. So B starts off, the City of Flagstaff will not do business with financial institutions that engage in the direct or indirect exploration, production, financing, profiting, or marketing of fossil fuel. Financial institutions doing business with the City of Flagstaff must provide a signed declaration and share evidence annually to the City Treasurer, such as third-party verification that the institution does not directly or indirectly provide financing to the fossil fuel industry. One, if a financial institution engages, it goes further, if it engages in financial support during the term of the contract, the city will consider termination of the contract with the institution. The signed declaration will be a factor for the city when determining responsibility of the financial institution's response. And that's the extent of option 3. Any questions?
Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you. This is actually for Mr. Tatter. I was going to wait, but it's kind of been brought up, so. So in my business, I'm just trying to think what it would be like to not have a bank in the city that I could walk into and do my banking when needed. So what would it be like? I went on the website, it's greensomething.com, and I did look at the 3 banks that were listed, none of which did I know anything about. They're not in Flagstaff. How would you or how would we do banking in person? And do we do that now?
So we don't use the drop-in bank very much, but we are an agency that accepts cash. In many of our activity centers and services that we provide, we're still accepting cash from our customers. And that is preferred for some customers that aren't bankable or so forth. So what we would have to look at is possibly depositing with a different bank or institution and then transferring funds to the awarded bank. It's kind of an end around to at least get the monies deposited locally. Or we could look to have an armored car service deliver our funds to the bank wherever it is. Could be costly and so forth. Separating banks and transfers will make it difficult for bank reconciliations and timing and all that stuff. But that's the way I see we could do it. Is it the way to do it? Probably not. But
Thank you.
Continue.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Future revisions and amendments. So we're going to continue the work on the sustainable procurement beyond 32.1. We're going to be working on other subcategories for 32.2, 3, et cetera, and so on. So after tonight, we'll continue working on that. The newly created sustainable procurement policy, we're working on a sustainable procurement policy as well. So we've been talking code. We've also been working on a sustainable procurement policy, and it's going to be the guiding principles for Article 32. And the policy objectives with Article 32 policy would be environmental impacts, social equity impacts, and economic impacts. And then we'll be looking at things for like vehicles, equipment, products and services. Those are those kind of things that are going to be coming back later. Okay, so staff will bring this back as a resolution next week, the June 4th meeting for your approval. But before we get there, we need to ask council for direction on which option they would like to move forward with in the resolution.
Thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
So, council, before we talk about it, can we go back to the previous slide? As much as I appreciate, thank you. And thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Before we discuss it, let's just stick to questions right now, and we have some public comment, and then we'll circle back and have the discussion. So I have a question for Nicole. And before I ask my question, just thank you to all staff for working together to come up with this. I appreciate that it's been many, many months in the making, so thank you. Nicole, what are some of the cities that you looked at when you were looking at what are other places doing in these terms?
Mayor, the research that we've conducted has a wide variety of examples, and I am not an expert by any means in procurement law, but we're fortunate enough to have some experts on staff. With that in mind, what we are seeing across the nation and actually internationally are a lot of different approaches towards utilizing a fossil-free or divestment, if you will, in the fossil fuel industry. Most recently, our neighbors in Colorado and Boulder County, for example, are utilizing divestment from fossil fuel investments in their healthcare system. And we're seeing it in building codes. So we're seeing a lot of different approaches to ensure that communities are aware and or making commitments to invest differently. So there's a really wide array of focus areas, if that makes sense. So in Arizona, no other community has moved forward in this manner that we've been able to track down. And again, with having our experts in procurement and state policy, I can't speak to that. But I do know that in reaching out to our peers across the state, we have not seen initiatives move forward successfully at this state.
Have there been any that have started discussions about it?
Not really.
Okay.
At this level, no.
Okay.
That I'm aware of. Was my search exhausted? Perhaps. But I do reach out to my peer network within the state that represents over 90 different jurisdictions. So I feel confident that we would know if there was initiatives moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. Additional questions, Council? Councilmember McCarthy?
Has there been any interest in this issue at our state legislature?
Councilmember McCarthy, I have not seen any legislature talking specifically about this. While the state laws are pretty detailed, they're also pretty vague in some instances. And so I have not seen anything specifically talking about what we're doing here. So, you know, sometimes silence means yes, or sometimes it doesn't.
So I guess I'll disagree. We have seen bills dropped related to this type of conversation at the state legislature. Nothing's passed, nothing's gone through, but it is something that has had an eye on it. Maybe not specifically in the banking service, but I've heard it on the investment side and those kind of things. So, yeah, it could be back around at some point. Just didn't come back at this time.
All right, Mayor, I have one other question. I see the date June 4th up there. I guess I'll ask where that came from. And the reason I'm bringing this up is there's a group called Fossil Free Arizona, and apparently they were told by someone on staff that this would come back on June 18th. So that's kind of how they've been working. I see heads nodding in the audience. So I might suggest that we bring this back on June 18th, just out of respect for people that were told that that was when it would come back. Mr. City Manager might have a comment. And thank you, Mayor.
Is this a good time, Mayor? Yeah, a correction, if I may. I was the author of that email that advised the group as to the timeline. I made it clear that we would have a work session discussion today, followed by an action item, but it was a draft or tentative timeline. It was not set in stone, and nor could it be. That communication was 2 months ago. So we have some flexibility here, first off. Second off, we have a very busy council agenda between now and the recess. We could lump things together, and it's going to cram everything into the last couple of meetings. we're sensitive to that, and we're trying to provide agendas that are manageable by this council and by our citizenry. But the more we forestall or push it down, the greater a factor that becomes. So I want us all to be aware of that. It was never represented that it was a hard and fast date. I know that for certain. Mayor, may I expand here a little bit on why we're here having this discussion, and forgive me for not doing so at the beginning, especially for not new council, not new anymore, but there are members here that I don't believe were at the dais when the petition was submitted in March of 2022. And we had a discussion at the dais about this. It was the Stop the Money Pipeline petition, and council elected at that time not to forward the petition. In the course of that discussion, council asked that we bring back a policy discussion at some point, and preferably prior to the termination of the existing banking services agreement. That agreement expires by its own terms next year, June of next year. So it's important to start having this discussion now. We've been having a lot of discussions over the past year about procurement policies and amendments. This one's been in the queue, and I pushed hard to get it in front of council before the recess because I'm frankly a little bit concerned that if we don't start having the policy discussion now, we will be late in the game as we start to go out for solicitation of new banking services. I want to make sure that staff has ample time to do that, and that has to be preceded by this discussion with council talking about the policy. Policy comes first, procurement and implementation of that policy follows that, and so we're on this timeline to address this in the renewal, or pardon me, not renewal, but the resolicitation of banking services next year. That stated, you know, there's no urgency to having this discussion. I think there is some urgency to maybe getting some council direction prior to the recess and preferably having that encapsulated in an action item so we can move forward and amend our policies as Patrick walked you through. The sooner the better on that, or things will be pushed into the future and we're going to find ourselves scrambling to do this, which is not a good way to formulate policy. So back to the comment about the 4th or the 18th, that is council's call. We're at your pleasure. Just please be aware of the reason why we put it on the 4th. It wasn't to rush conversation here. It was because we are in charge of setting the agenda for council, and we're mindful of the fact that you have a lot on your plate, adoption of a budget, a possible adoption of water rates, just to name a couple of quick ones that are going to occupy a lot of your time between now and July. So we're sensitive to that, and I think that is where the conversation should lie, and not where it might be convenient for interests to come forward and prepare for this. We, of course, want to be inclusive in this conversation, but I think at the very start of the conversation is what is manageable in council's agenda. Thank you for letting me go back and explain why we're here and having this discussion tonight.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, just one quick question. Patrick, I'm sure you can answer this one. The conversation we're having revolves around amendments to Article 4 and a new Article 32.
Correct.
I just want to make sure, what we're talking about is not exclusive to banking, right?
This is just for banking services.
So the conversation is only about banking services. It's not about general procurement of anything such as radios or?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. We're still working on that. We've made some progress in that, but we still have a little bit of work to do, and you'll be seeing those come sometime in the future. But for sake of what City Manager was just talking about with the solicitation, it's a complex solicitation, and there's a transition that's going to take place between banking. So we need to take care of this one now so that we can be ready to do that.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I'm glad I asked that question. That's an important distinction for me.
Thank you.
When would you need everything together to go out to bid for banking services?
So figuratively, if this is approved next week, we'll do the renewal for the 1 year for what we have now. We can start pretty soon. We'll have to probably start pretty soon during the summer, towards the end of summer, to build a solicitation and get it on the street. Again, it's a complex solicitation, trying to meet all our banking needs for this big organization. So we got to give people time to review it, formulate questions, get their questions answered, have it open, evaluate those, and then conduct any interviews or discussions with high scoring, and then come to a decision on who we want to move forward with, get a best and final from them, come to council, say this is who we want to go with. We talk about it a little bit, and when you approve that contract, then Rick's got a lot of work with a transition between banks, and there's going to be some overlap on some of that.
So we would need all of our materials together before the end of the year, certainly.
Absolutely.
And before the end of the summers, it sounds like.
Well, we want to have something, an RFP kind of dialed in to put on the street by the end of summer.
Okay, so by the end of August.
End of August. I was thinking September, but yeah. Oh, and Rick hasn't determined that yet. Yeah. And it all depends, I guess, too, on Rick's availability to draft that scope for us.
Okay, thank
Right.
you.
And sorry about that, Rick. Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick. It's going to take time to build a scope and build an RFP and go through that process. And we've got a lot of work we're already doing within the organization. So I can't give you any guarantees as far as when this will get on the street or back in front of you. We'll do what we can and bring it back appropriately. But my preference, as I've stated before, is continue with the bank we have to provide the right level of service that our institution needs. We need a bank that really does the full service, is secure, won't go under foreclosure at any time, and really it's one of the most important things for a city of Flagstaff is our financial services. So I struggle with going with a lesser bank for this type of purpose, but that's my opinion. I've stated that a year ago, but we're here. I can go out and get another cooperative, extend a contract. It'd be a lot easier for staff, take a lot less time, but I'm kind of in a corner as far as direction I'm getting. So I just want to share that 2 cents.
Thank you, and I understand that. My question is, it's more related to when a decision from us is absolutely necessary, and it sounds like this can't wait until after the break.
I guess it doesn't have to be done before the break. It's just my personal opinion. We'd like to get some things off our plate. But if longer we go, longer we wait, it could mean I have to extend Wells Fargo for another year or 6 months while we still work on RFPs. So I think there is a way I can continue banking services at the impact of a late decision on this procurement code manual. There's impacts that'll go back and forth. Preference, let's make this decision and move on, but I'll give you the time you need and then we'll get it out there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, so you said that this was about banking, about financial services.
Correct.
But does this not set the stage for everything else that comes after this in terms of sustainability purchasing? Does this not set the stage?
Well, it could, yes. It kind of sets the stage that, hey, this is the kind of things we're looking at doing as it pertains to procurements for other things. Mm-hmm. Now, there's going to be variables with those other things too, like availability and the practicality of doing that, but that's why we're also working on the policy to help us get there. But yes, figuratively, it does set the stage.
So we could go back to this and say, our policy says da-da-da-da-da, and we would be locked into that. Is that correct?
Right now, once approved banking services, yes, in the preamble of the Amendment 32 that starts off Article 32, yes. But until we have something else actually in place, no. So right now, it would just be banking services.
Thank you.
City Manager and then Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. And I want to thank staff for putting together this thorough report with 3 options for Council to consider. The options are obviously in progression in terms of their impact or their potential impact upon the procurement process. Councilmember Harris, I'd like to also add on to the response to your question about setting the stage. Yet when we received that council direction at the dais 2 years ago, it was all about banking services, and that's how we've been proceeding. We are mindful that this may set the stage for other services that are vended by the city. You heard reference to Boulder County. I think that was in regard to healthcare. You can add to that list. It could be insurance. It could be a number of things. So there is that to be cognizant of, and I heard the question earlier about whether there's been legislative response to this. I am aware of a bill that was introduced a year ago, last summer, not quite a year ago. That was an attempt by our state legislature to preempt local governments from putting forth criteria that speaks to environmental, social, and governance, ESG, investing as metrics for consideration in the procurement process. That bill was vetoed, so nothing ever came of it. But I mention it because I think it's a good example of something that can happen and will likely happen again in the future, you know, in terms of legislative response. We will keep an eye on that. But back to the present discussion, it's about banking services. And I heard Nicole reference, or Patrick, that there may be other policy considerations within the procurement manual. We'll make it a point to touch base with council early on in those discussions and gauge your interest in these policy considerations and how far and to what extent we should go with these. That discussion, I think, needs to originate with the city council, probably in a setting like this where it's a work session, and we'll get your feedback on that before moving forward. But on this one, once again, and I'll conclude with this, this is responsive to a request by council, by the mayor and council 2 years ago at the dais, which in turn was responsive to a petition that was not advanced, but a desire to have this discussion was clearly made at that meeting. So it's taken some time to put things together. There's been a lot of amendments procurement-wise in between, but now's the time to be having this discussion. Mayor, from your question of just a minute ago, it certainly would be preferable to have some action on this prior to the recess, but I don't think council should feel compelled to do that. If council wants to think about this as an important part of a very important policy, we can, have a little more time and continue the discussion after the recess. It's going to put a little onus on staff to go through this procurement process pretty expeditiously if that's the case, but it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember House?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to get a point of clarification on the last question from Councilmember Harris and Mr. Brown, your response to that, that it sounded like you were saying that setting this standard for banks would necessitate automatically utilizing this policy for other procurements, and I don't think that's what you meant.
For banking services, it will be, once it's approved, it will set the precedence for that. But not anything that comes in subsequent subsections of Article 32, as we don't have those yet. So it doesn't really, it could set the stage of this is where we're going, but it's not really going to set the stage specifically for what those items are in the subsections. Those will have their own variables in there.
Okay,
Does
so,
that help answer?
yes,
Okay,
so
thank
any other areas that this might eventually apply to would require a specific amendment to procurement standards for that area, is that correct?
So procurement standards for that particular area will be drafted for that particular area. Now, I don't know if there's going to be something that we come across where we may need to go back or reference banking services. And that could happen. I don't know that it will. But as we go through and we add on more subsections, they'll have their own variables. They'll look a little bit different. They'll feel a little bit different. But if there's an interface with banking services, we certainly will interface with it, but we'll do it from a standpoint most likely of see Article 32.1B.
Okay, if there are no additional questions at this time, I will take public comment. Jill Stevenson.
Thank you, council and staff. I'm feeling so encouraged that you are bringing this issue forth and considering the importance of the carbon neutrality plan in going forward with procurements right now just with banking. But that's, thank you. I realize that's a lot of work and a lot of work coming up. If any of us choose a financial institution that is unreliable or just plain fraudulent, we can be in trouble. And sometimes it may not be immediately apparent. But one way to avoid a negative result is to thoroughly research the companies that we deal with, which it sounds like hopefully the staff is going to be doing with your approval. The obvious step, of course, is to explore banking opportunities other than Wells Fargo. We know they are a major lender to oil and gas companies, as well as having a record of corrupt practices with their customers. Now is the time, with renewal of the Wells Fargo contract approaching in June of 2025. If our carbon neutrality goal is truly 2030, we need to be doing everything possible to stop supporting big oil. We should be encouraging sustainable procurement in every arena, eventually after, hopefully, we are securing this in the banking field. I hope you will consider what harm any companies do before dealing with them. And I hope you will consider these options very carefully because they are strong, some stronger than others, of course. But we need to be strong. We're in a climate emergency, and we need to be doing everything possible to negate the effects of it. So please consider this carefully before you make a decision. And thank you very much for your consideration and hard work. I know these are not easy things to do, all the research you have to do. It's admirable. So thank you very much.
Thank you. David Spence.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is David Spence, and I've had a longstanding interest in this topic. I've been a member of Fossil Free Arizona, which is a climate action team of NASCA, of which I'm a member. I am not here tonight speaking on behalf of either of those organizations, but rather speaking on my own behalf. I, like the previous speaker, congratulate the procurement staff and the other staff and council that have pursued this effort and response to our request a couple years ago for the city to do an RFP to look beyond Wells Fargo, what other banks that might have a cleaner green credentials than Wells Fargo does. I personally was disappointed with the council's decision to renew the contract, but over time, I've come to understand the restraints that were in existence, and I just sincerely thank the procurement department and the sustainability department for looking into this and coming up with 3 options that obviously need further consideration. I can promise you that our group will be present either on whenever this comes up for final discussion, be it June 4th or June 18th or any other time. We'll be here to share our ideas with you, and I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. Wells Fargo is a huge financer of the fossil fuel industry, and they've shown no remorse. Since the Paris Climate Accord was reached, the big banks in the United States and others around the world have continued to pour lending support into the fossil fuel industry. So we can take steps here at the local level. And I just want to recall how Flagstaff has been a leader in our state. We tried and enacted a plastic bag, single-use plastic bag ordinance. It got shot down by the state legislature, but we put the effort out there. We've been leaders in a living wage, a minimum wage. That too met resistance, but the city has come out on top of that one. So let's not be timid. We can do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Gail Jackson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Gail Jackson, President and CEO of Econa. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I feel like I need to talk to you a little bit about what this decision could do for the future of development in our region. 80% of the world's energy right now depends on fossil fuels, and a lot of our building costs here are 30 to 40% higher than in the valley. So if a banking service clause like this is approved and you're only allowed to use such a minimal amount of banks, like, one, how do you like, what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm not prepared. How do you make sure that everyone's in compliance with that? Like, how do you do that? So I guess I just worry a little bit when we start choosing businesses. We support all businesses in Northern Arizona because it takes all of them to make us be vibrant. So I would just caution that if you restrict the types of banks that you use, what it could potentially do for other crises, such as the housing crisis that's in place right now as well. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. All right, so that is the last public comment that we have on this topic. So, Council. What are you thinking?
I'll get this out of the way.
All right.
I mean, I'll start.
Vice Mayor.
No, that was a little quip. I'm actually very interested in this conversation. I'm glad we're having it. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. I want to thank those who agitated around this to get this conversation to happen. Several of you are in the room. Dr. Spence, I know you're one of them. Kim Curtis, others with Fossil Free Arizona. I think you play an important role in the community, and I'm on the wavelength of trying to do something when we can do something. The city's in a position here to weigh in on this topic, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm glad we're positioning ourselves to have a chance to weigh in on this topic. You know, I'm very interested in how we weigh sustainability factors in all of our procurement considerations. So I'm hopeful that that conversation will continue down the road. I know I've brought it up before. I mentioned radios earlier. I have a very clear memory of a big conversation around the radios, certain other things. I'd have to go back to get the details, but I do remember wondering how these bidders, you know, what is their role in helping Flagstaff move towards carbon neutrality? Are any of these bidders really contrary to that? I think it is a legitimate factor that we should be weighing when we're deciding between two competitive bids. All else being equal, the city of Flagstaff should absolutely give the bid to the organization, the business, that is in alignment with our carbon neutrality goals. So this conversation is the beginning of allowing us to codify that so that it's not just some arbitrary decision we're making from time to time, but something that is sound in terms of our procedures and operations. I will say that option one seems like a nice, I'm interested in option one. I don't know if that's going to win the day or not. I wouldn't go further than that at this point. Option one seems like a nice way for us to dip our toe in the water without sticking our neck out too much, to mix metaphors. I do like the idea of when we do a procurement, we're asking questions about sustainability, about carbon neutrality. I like the idea of just in general being in the habit and having the muscle memory of engaging the companies that we interact with and you know, mandating a certain amount of transparency around the values that we have here at the city. So that seems like a good way in. I appreciate staff for having these internal conversations and coming up with these options. You are definitely leaving us with different choices here, and option one seems like it's the Goldilocks at this point in our journey. It concerns me that this conversation hasn't moved forward or further along in any other municipalities around this state of Arizona. In this regard, I don't think that our financial team and the city of Flagstaff is well positioned to be the guinea pig here and to take on the burden of you know, making all the mistakes that other people learn from with respect to this. So, you know, I'm all about Flagstaff showing leadership. I think there's a lot of different ways that we're doing that in very strongly. But this one is a Pandora's box that I just don't think our team, which is already short-staffed, long-term short staffing, is able to really, you know, meet head-on at this point. So that's part of the consideration for me. I appreciate Gail Jackson with Econa mentioning some of the concerns that she had. I do agree that, you know, we need to be, we're a big family up here in northern Arizona. I don't want to be vilifying anybody, certainly not our local Wells Fargo branch and other Wells Fargo branches around northern Arizona. So we can have these conversations at a larger level. I think we can affect, you know, how businesses are feeling that they're held to account by municipalities. But dipping the toe in the water as opposed to sticking the neck out kind of seems like the sweet spot for me. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. I am in agreement. I think option one is definitely a step in the right direction. I am hesitant on the other two, frankly, just considering the limitations that it could put on our financial security as a city and development and those partnerships that we rely on. I'm also concerned, frankly, and I say this not as a political statement, but just as a state of fact of the current state of affairs, is the direction that the legislature, whether at the state or federal level, could go in the next several years with the upcoming election. I think we have to keep that in consideration as well. That's not to say that it's not worthwhile to make moves in the right direction, but I do think that we have to be mindful of those potential roadblocks that we could come across very quickly if there are changes in that direction. So I am in agreement on option one being my preference, and I'll look forward to hearing the rest of council's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have some thoughts, but I wanted to ask Nicole, when we were talking earlier, she kind of looked at me like she had something to say, and I think she does, so.
Oh, thank you, Council. I was just wondering if it would be helpful to drop in the chat the framework for the full procurement policy that staff have been working on. It's very much in the draft form, but there had seemed to be some confusion. So it was just an offering.
Thank you.
I think that we've moved beyond that. So.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Thanks. So when I was looking at this over the weekend, I was leaning towards option two, to be honest with you, because I feel like, you know, I want to be bold and I want to go out there, and it seems like such a great thing for our city. But I did email staff and I got some good replies this morning, thank you. And after reading that, and really understanding, you know, from my own background too, on what this means for the organization. I want to do number two, but the reality is I feel like we are going to struggle probably to just get option one on the table. So my vote will be for option one. I do appreciate staff and the time you've taken on this. You really listened to us. You gave us, you know, the whole wide range, and I appreciate the information, and it really helped me. And Austin, I'm with you with dipping our toe in. That's a good way to phrase it. So thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
So I'm going to have quite a bit to say about this, and I'm usually really very careful about using this this dais as whatever. But I think this is important enough for me to speak out right now. I worry about us meaning Flagstaff, trying to always be the first. I think that wanting to be the first is good sometimes, but I think that we can't be the first in everything. And it's not that we're not going to try to do our best to help our city. I think that sometimes we want to strut. We want everybody to see us. And I guess I feel some kind of way about that. So I don't want us to move forward with this. We just heard from our treasurer. Where did he go? There. Okay. We just heard from him how he feels about this. He's a little nervous about it. I think that's what I'm hearing, but you can speak for yourself. But I listened to that, and if he's not jumping on board on this, I'm really hesitant about us going there. And so I'm not going to pick any of the options. I want us to not do this or not move this forward at this point in time. Then I'm going to say something else, and I hope I do not offend everyone. But we oftentimes want to do things that are convenient for us. Everybody that has a mortgage with Wells Fargo that is against us, they ought to change their mortgage to one of those other three banks. Everybody that has any issues with, I'm not going to say that part, but I think that we need to just stop and think about what we're doing. And then the last thing I am going to say, and this is really close to my heart, when I talked to some of our staff about the issues regarding some sustainability, and some of the countries who develop or who make or whose community citizens make the things that we need to help us move toward our carbon neutrality goal, they are the countries who are violating human rights issues. And the comment that I received was that that's the cost of doing business. And I think that that is wrong. So if we're going to do that, then we really do need to think about this all the way around. And it's not that I don't realize that that we're in a climate crisis, because I am. I happen to be a very educated woman, and I know that we are facing a climate crisis. And so I don't want anyone leaving here thinking that I don't understand that. But we do not need to let this tail wag this dog. And so I'm going to stop right there, because I'm probably going to say something that's really going to offend somebody. So thank you very much. And staff, you are amazing. And I've told you that over and over and over again. I trust you. I value your work. I know that you care about our community, because you put in lots of time and effort and energy. And most of the time, I'm going to support you. A lot of times, I'm not. And that's okay, because I'm doing it from a place of caring. And so thank you.
Councilmember McCarthy?
What? I guess I am having too much fun up here. Option 3 is a hard no for me. So I'm kind of between where Ms. Harris is about not doing it, or option 1. I mean, why would I say option 0? And I guess the reason is this really won't do anything to prevent climate change. It'll make us feel good, but it really won't do much. So, and I know people probably disagree with me, but the oil industry is going to get their money one place or another, so it really doesn't matter if they get it from Wells Fargo or someone else. So I think I can go with option 1, but with some hesitation. Option 2 and 3 sounds like nobody's going there, and option 3 again is a hard no. Thank you.
Thank you. So this council has previously directed staff to look at our zoning codes with a lens toward both housing and climate. And staff is doing a great job doing that. I see this as a similar measure, looking at our banking with a climate lens, and with 10 questions out of everything available, we'll still be banking with the bank that can meet the financial needs of this city. But we're asking the right questions about banks' climate goals and their commitments to climate. I will say that, and I've said this before, I'm very focused on the carbon neutrality plan and making sure that we're addressing the strategies that are laid out in that. And procurement is not one of the strategies laid out in the plan. So I'm not really interested in the short term of having additional discussions like this. I see this as more of a one-off, because I want to see us with all of our energy on the strategies that we've already agreed on in the carbon neutrality plan. So I support number 1, And it looks like we have 5 of us who do at this point.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. I appreciate the direction, and we will come back with the amendment and resolution next week with the slight revision from Council Member House from may to will. So we'll correct that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving down to item number 9, Workforce Development Strategic Plan.
We lost some. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. The item before you is the initial review of the findings and recommendations of the Workforce Development Analysis and Strategic Plan. Council requested an analysis of the local workforce and the workforce development systems in our community with the intention of better understanding this important issue and determining if the city should be taking a more active role. Staff worked with local workforce partners to craft a scope, and keen independent research was identified through a competitive request for statement of qualifications process. They've worked with staff, with the community, and with the Economic Development Strategic Plan consultants to ensure the plan reflects our community and our processes. And after analysis and a lot of discussion with the community, which Keen's going to further expand upon, they have come this evening to discuss their draft findings and recommendations and to receive feedback. There will be time to incorporate feedback received, and we intend to bring the final document for discussion and potential adoption on July 2nd. I will mention there was a minor modification to slide 15 from the presentation in the packet. You'll be able to see it's an additional strategy down at the bottom. With that, I'm very pleased to introduce David Keen and Dr. Nicole Yates of Keen Independent Research, who will be taking the presentation from here. I'm available for questions anytime, though.
Thank you, and welcome. It's good to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you again, Mayor Daggett. Vice Mayor, Council, thank you. We are very excited to present our Workforce Development Draft Strategic Plan to you. I want to note that this is accompanied by a document that you all will receive. The strategic plan itself is about a dozen pages or so. And so what we'll provide for you today is kind of a brief overview of that. So then you can, once you have the document, which is also supported by additional appendices that kind of get into more of the details of our research, then we would ask for your feedback. If you have any additional comments or questions, you can provide us with feedback directly via email by June 7th. So then we will have time to incorporate that into a final report, which we, as Dave McIntyre mentioned, will present back to you on July 2nd. So, as I mentioned, we're going to give you kind of a brief overview of what's in that report. So we'll start out with a little bit of context for the study and for the labor market in Flagstaff. Then we'll give you a brief overview of workforce development, go into some background on what we did in the study and some of the findings. Then we'll talk a little bit about the demographics and the labor market trends in Flagstaff and the county. Then we'll talk about some of the existing workforce development resources that are already serving Flagstaff and county residents. We'll talk a little bit about stakeholder feedback, case studies, and then finally we'll look at those recommendations, or those strategies rather, that'll have some associated actions that are recommended for the city. So let me turn this over to Dave Keen, principal with Keen Independent. I forgot to say my title, but I'm Dr. Nicole Yates, and I'm a senior consultant with Keen Independent. Turning it over to Dave Keen for context.
This is going to be really quick. We know your community pretty well, but you know it really well. And it's almost, here was what was in and not in the study, and there's a lot of things that provide context that we didn't look at. One is it's really expensive to live here. especially if you even make the city minimum wage. And a lot of people want to live here. A lot of people from the Phoenix metro area are buying second homes here. This is going to be a challenge for Flagstaff now and into the future of how do you balance out, jobs that can pay you a wage that can allow you to live here if you didn't have a home passed down to you. So we know that. We also know the importance of tourism, the service industry here. That's here because this is a great place for people to visit. It's a great place to stop on the way to Grand Canyon or other recreation amenities in northern Arizona. Those jobs don't pay, many of those jobs do not pay very well. And so it's that balance, or maybe sometimes imbalance between what can you make at one of these jobs and being able to live in the community and having a path forward to be able to, maybe you're starting one of those jobs, but you get further training to be able to get a higher paying job where your skills are applied and you can afford a home and raise a family in the community. These are critical subjects for you. We know this, not really a part of the study, but everybody that we talked with spoke about that imbalance. The minimum wage ordinance came up, and we didn't study that either. It's from our point of view, we can't say whether that's net good or net bad. It just came up a lot as we talked to employers, as we talked to people trying to work in the workforce development area, and some of the we called it unintended consequences, which may be actually a benefit of the ordinance, where hey, now you make slightly more money than it is to for you to qualify for certain benefits. Child care came up as one of those examples. Or maybe businesses can't employ those employees at the hours that they were getting before because of the higher wage. So that came up. That's not a surprise to you all, and again, it's not our job or our study to say whether that was good or bad. As we had some of the discussions down in Phoenix with many of you all when many of the leaders of the community came down and had a briefing on economic conditions in Flagstaff, a lot of data-focused discussion. But you're almost at a crossroads that I think the Economic Development Strategic Plan that you saw from Stiletto really was trying to address is you have a lot of strengths. You're always going to have a strong tourism economy here. You're going to have these service jobs. It's great that people want to buy second homes here. That creates more income into the community. But what's the balance? And can we work into the balance jobs that pay a living wage in Flagstaff? And that's really the focus of what Dr. Yates and I had to talk to you about today, is building behind this Economic Development Strategic Plan to get those higher paying jobs, especially those that don't require a 4-year college degree. Those pathways are important. The 4-year college degree pathway, you have a major university located in your community. People know how to go to college. People need support to get through college, get a job and all that. But those that are at the greatest disadvantage and the most likely to leave are those that have not gone that 4-year college path. And so you're going to be hearing a lot about that from us. We want to get to our comments, but we wanted to just quickly mention that context, because the context is important. And you've been in this area. I've had lots of conversations with people who have been long-term residents of Flagstaff, and they bring back issues from 30 years ago that were exactly these. We know you've been dealing with them for quite a long time. We're trying to get some extra emphasis on how you get people trained to be able to get higher wages so they can stay in Flagstaff, have families, and really add to that fabric of the community. Otherwise, you're at danger of being a university town and a second home town from people from Phoenix who really want to have a second home up here. So back to Dr. Yates.
All right. Thank you, Dave. So I'm going to just give a brief overview of what we mean when we talk about workforce development. So there are kind of 4 primary components of workforce development, and those include facilitating job search and placement, occupational skills trainings, that's training that's specifically related to a particular job, job search training, so training and assisting folks with finding employment, which can also include things like resume review, interview prep, et cetera. And then direct support, which can include assistance with childcare or with transportation, interview clothing, access to technology, et cetera. So for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, that is, many of you know this already, but that is the federal funding that's going to support these programs that are designed to help local workers and connect them with employers. So you kind of have the federal program, and which then mandates that states have their own, states each have a unified plan to provide workforce development programs that are outlined in that legislation, and then those plans are enacted by the local, the state and local workforce development boards. And so here you have the Coconino County Workforce Development Board. So those boards are conveners of the workforce development programs and stewards of those WIOA dollars. All right, let me turn it back over to Dave for.
Yeah, we often do these types of graphs in our other market analyses. It was very interesting to do this for Flagstaff. You may have seen this in your advanced materials, but on the top graph we have a current snapshot, and the color scheme there is showing different generations of people. If you go back into time, we're showing 2022 in the top one. Everybody shifts to the left if you go back in time. You have this big bulge of, say, baby boomers. If you go back far enough in the 15 to 25 or 29 year age groups. And what did they do back then? Most of them left. And this is not just anecdotally. Everybody knows the stories of, hey, somebody could get more money and get a cheaper home to be able to raise a family somewhere else, even though they really wanted to stay here. This has been going on forever. Here's the projections. In 2040, all the people here that are in the late teens and early 20s, half of those people are going to leave and be gone by 2040, based on projections from the state of Arizona, and we believe these. This is very, very consistent. So you're educating people here. You're educating people for high-wage jobs, and they turn around and leave. And we're trying to build, between the Economic Development Strategic Plan and the Workforce Development Plan, a way for more of those people to stay and more of the people without a college degree in those age cohorts to be able to have a career and build a life in the home that, the town they may have grown up in.
Oh, this is still you.
We say leisure hospitality is really important. This is why. I mean, you've seen these statistics before. Employing 17,000 people in Coconino County in 2022, and with growth in that sector expected between in the next 10 years, education and health services, which Dr. Yates is going to talk about more in a moment, is also growing and is also very important to the community. And you see the other areas. You are manufacturing can be a critical area for good jobs, especially for people who don't have who are trained on the job rather than going through a formal 4-year degree. And that's another one of the priority sectors in the Economic Development Strategic Plan. We're going to talk about construction as well. Same thing. That the pathway for construction is you get paid while you learn. And that may be the only option available to many young people that are in Flagstaff right now, and can lead to a living wage career working in construction. So I'll hand it back to Nikki.
Thank you. All right, so this is just a super brief overview of existing workforce development resources. And again, I'll note that We do have a more exhaustive list of these, both in the appendices in which we talk to folks at NAU, CCC, the city, the Workforce Development Board, and also an appendix where we specifically explore workforce development resources that we found through internet searches and other additional conversations. But education programs primarily, as Dave mentioned, you've got a stellar university and community college here, NAU in particular doing very well at graduating students with those four-year degrees. There are there are a few kind of independent training programs, a couple of sporadic ones, and these programs I've included here are supported by our folks that go through these programs if they're eligible, which I'll talk about in a second. They can receive subsidies for these programs, participate in these training programs. And then there are a couple of apprenticeship programs within Flagstaff that can also be supported by these dollars. So one of the things that I want to note about eligibility for these WIOA-funded programs, so programs have to be on the eligible training provider list to qualify for subsidy by via WIOA funding. And then there are individual eligibility requirements, and there is an individual eligibility requirement that is based on income. So there's an income ceiling, and that income ceiling is about $14,000 per individual. So that's a thing to note, is that many individuals who might benefit from this training or benefit from some form of subsidized training may not qualify because they exceed the income amount. So some of the stakeholder feedback that we received, again, we had conversations with folks within the city, the county, from NAU, CCC, talked to someone at Icona, and so a lot of the feedback that we got, again, Dave kind of mentioned some of this at the start of the presentation, but that some of the challenges to the local workforce include that high cost of living, lack of affordable housing, lack of affordable childcare, these things that are kind of outside of the scope of workforce development, but are just as, if not more important, to also consider. They're just outside of the scope of this particular study. There were also, we had folks discuss shortages of workers that were in some of the skilled trades and nursing, and that, again, that kind of had some conversations with employers, small business employers, and also some at some of the larger companies that are headquartered here, with struggling with the minimum wage and kind of the ramifications of that. So when we asked stakeholders we asked stakeholders what role the city could play in workforce development and supporting workforce development, ideally. And so, the vice mayor in the previous topic had mentioned leadership. That came up a lot, where folks do, I think, see the city of Flagstaff as a leader in northern Arizona and want the city to take on that leadership role when it comes to workforce development as well. And then additionally, we also heard a lot of folks discussing education, so being able to inform people in the community about what options that they have for workforce development, being able to educate business leaders about options that they have in terms of ways they might get some of their on-the-job training funded, being able to, and then kind of just serving as that, serving in that again goes back to that leadership role of providing education or providing kind of explanations for how the workforce development system works in a way that is accessible and really elevates the work that the County Workforce Development Board is doing. So had a few quotes there that are from people who participated in interviews and small group discussions that we had. So I will give you all a second to digest those, and I will ingest water. All right. So moving on, we did a few case studies as well, just to get an idea of what other communities were doing in terms of workforce development. And so we identified Asheville, North Carolina, Bend, Oregon, and Missoula, Montana as some as communities to study, and this was based on a few different factors, including geography, proximity to a university, and also a strong community college presence. So again, details on that are available in that report. We have a report appendix that specifically goes into some detail on these case studies. But some of the key takeaways that I wanted to highlight that inform some of what our recommended strategies are for the city, or that these city governments, the ones that we studied, they really don't directly offer workforce development programs or services. They serve more so as partners in workforce development rather than offering that directly. And that, that is kind of the job of more so the workforce development boards, that they lead the efforts, and then the cities provide that support where they can. We also found that community colleges in these communities were very instrumental in providing workforce development programs and services, as is Coconino Community College here. Some of these training programs that we looked at that these communities kind of offer their residents are pretty general in terms of skills building, soft skills, we like to call them. But some communities are investing in specific programs to meet these acute workforce needs, so like CDL training when transportation needs are acute. And then also, as we see in Flagstaff, the cost of living and housing affordability and availability were also factors that impacted the workforces in those communities as well. So getting into the workforce development strategy, so we had many conversations with Stiletto, who did the city's economic development strategic plan, and so our workforce development strategic plan is very aligned with that, and so we do kind of organize it around these priority sectors that Stiletto identified through their workshop, and these are these kind of key sectors where the city could focus on sustainable economic growth. But then we also identified a couple of additional areas, as Dave mentioned, construction. That's one thing that we talk about a little bit, that kind of cut across a lot of these sectors, but we thought was important to mention in addition to those. So we talk about the kind of pathways in two different ways. So first, we talk a little bit about these four-year degree pathways, and then pathways for non-four-year degree, four-year degree jobs that require four-year degrees, and jobs that do not require four-year degrees. So the first one for four-year degree pathways, as we mentioned, NAU and CCCA do a great job of graduating thousands of individuals in lots of different fields. And so these kind of key priority sectors that we identified with jobs that require four-year degrees include astronomy, biomedical and healthcare, and then forestry. And then we also want to note that there are management level positions that are available across sectors, so even ones that aren't included here, that often have bachelor's degree requirements. So this table here on the right demonstrates these median annual earnings of occupations that are related to each of those key priority sectors. And as we can see, many of them are very well paying. We estimated, based on some of our research, that an individual needs about $50,000 to live, $50,000 annually to live somewhat comfortably in Flagstaff. So we tried to look at professions that were at or above that threshold when available. And then next, for the professions that require high school degrees or equivalent, just kind of those ones that do not require a four-year college degree. There are a lot of two-year degree and certificate programs that are available through CCC, not all, but many through CCC. And the key priority sectors that we identified here with jobs that are related, that require high school degrees are food processing and manufacturing. So those are, and then the other couple of sectors that we identified here were construction and transportation. So food processing, that kind of fits into manufacturing, so that's not a separate thing with, that's not a separate category on this table with separate occupations. And again, individuals within these jobs can also kind of advance to some of these supervisory positions with experience. So again, we tried to kind of stay close to that 50,000 mark. There are a few positions that are a little below that. But these are kind of the top, the occupations with the top median annual earnings. And then that one, this is kind of same information, but then this includes transportation occupations as well. Okay, so then this kind of, I think this is our penultimate slide, but so our overall goals for the city. So we've got this table here that's got kind of your goal and then who the target population is for each one, and then some sample actions that would make progress toward each goal, and then a time frame for accomplishing each of these. And so the time frame is very much an estimate based on our consideration of resources. There might be additional staff needed, there might be additional budget needed. So it's kind of based on that, but this is really intended to be a kind of a starting place and a working document for the city to kind of use it as it is helpful for you. So I'll just read off the main goals and then highlight a couple of sample actions. So the first one is promote existing programs and pathways to 4-year degree and higher required jobs. So again, that target population would be workers that have bachelor's degrees or higher. So some of the sample actions, one thing we think could be helpful is the development of a workforce development landing page on the city's website that describes these career pathways and provides a bit more detail in terms of how folks can pursue those, especially if the city has adopted that economic development plan that has those key sectors. Maybe that's a good thing to highlight. The second goal, encouraging new certificate and training programs. So we do recommend the formalization of a partnership with the County Workforce Development Board. Also, one of the areas where the city could be really helpful, this will kind of come up in the last goal as well, but is collecting data from employers on types of skills that incoming employees need to ensure that the local training that's available aligns up with that. And then to endorse any new training programs that the city finds particularly compelling or that will lead to economic self-sufficiency. Those programs are added to the programs can be added to the eligible training provider list via approval by the County Workforce Development Board and then the State Workforce Development Board. So they kind of handle that process. The third one would be to promote upskilling programs. And so this one we imagine targeting workers that are looking to advance and change careers. One of the things that we didn't really focus on here, even though it's a large industry, is the hospitality industry, because a lot of our research indicates that many of those folks are well equipped to enter those industries and receive a lot of their training and experience like while they are in the job. And so many of those folks might benefit from these upskilling programs so that they can advance or so they can switch industries perhaps. And so then again, that one, a couple of the actions to highlight were, again, that partnership with the Workforce Development Board, including on that landing page some overviews of trainings and skill building programs that are available to local workers, and then developing a communications program. That was one thing that we heard a lot as well, was that the city can kind of be the mouthpiece for a lot of these existing resources. And then finally, facilitate conversations with businesses to determine needs. And we really envision this affecting all workers. So having a formal business advisory group that regularly solicits feedback from various sectors. We did hear from a lot of business owners that sometimes they feel like their voices are not as loud as they would like them to be, and so having that business advisory group that that encourages business owners and representatives to provide feedback directly to the city could be a great way for folks that are in the business community to feel heard, and also could be a great way for the city to encourage more local business leaders to serve on the County Workforce Development Board. And then finally, one of the things I mentioned was that income ceiling for individuals receiving subsidization from WIOA to participate in eligible training programs. So one way the city might be able to provide training or provide businesses with some assistance here when they can't. When folks are not able to meet those income requirements, they can explore using city BBB funds to support businesses in developing those paid internships. Again, when folks are not eligible due to those income eligibility restrictions. Yeah. So again, we've got a lot more. There's a little bit more detail. That was a kind of a brief overview.
We've already done the thank you thing.
Yeah, so we'll just put it back to this. That's what I said. I was like, we already had a. Yeah, so we'll just leave that there, I guess. Yeah, so again, got some more information in that report that, again, about 12 pages that's supported by a lot of appendices, but really appreciate your attention, and we are happy to take any questions, comments now, and additionally, we'll receive any questions or comments via email until June 7th, so we've got time to incorporate that into a final report that we will give to you. Any concluding words, Dave?
I do not.
Great, no. Okay, thank you.
If I could just mention, Mayor, if I could just mention real quick, I did want to point out that we do have representatives from ECONA and from the Workforce Development Board that joined us this evening. We appreciate all their help with helping put this together, both in the scope and then as partners within this work. We work a lot with them on this type of work, so wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, Councilmember House.
Thank you both for the presentation. And I'm not sure really who these questions will go to, so maybe they'll be you, Dave, but they could be for you as well. The first is I'm looking at this in conjunction with the Economic Development Strategic Plan and the recent ECONA study, and I'm wondering how you're envisioning the relationship or the partnership between these various plans or strategies.
City first, yeah, yes.
Mayor, Councilmember House, thank you for the question. So the studies all sort of work together and build on each other, even though they come in a little bit differently. As we talked about during the strategic plan conversation last week, ECONA's study is much more regional, so we kind of work within the Flagstaff world, but also tie into their plan. Their plan was referenced and was used both by Keene and by Stiletto as a part of their participation, and ECONA was involved as well. Also, as you saw, as we worked our way into it, we had Stiletto and Keene in communication as the plans went forward. And so Keene was using some of the information and looking at the sectors that were being created, and I think you saw some of the jobs from those various sectors that were put up there. One of the things, though, that we talked with Keene about is that while we may be focusing our strategic plan on certain target sectors because they are places where we have a lot of potential growth, that doesn't mean that we're not going to also be focusing on the trades and the skills that are necessary to help keep that growth going, right? So even if we have a lot of focus within astronomy, we know that construction, plumbing, the trades in general, CDL drivers, are critical for all our industries across sector. And we know that there's a shortage in those as well. So you saw those references to construction in there too. So while on the one hand, the Economic Development Strategic Plan gives us sectors that we can drive towards who are generally going to be trying to create those higher paying jobs, or that are creating jobs that build off our history and off our future. But that doesn't mean that we're limiting our workforce development activities to the sectors in there, because we know that in order to have, as was mentioned, in order to have a vibrant workforce, we need people to build houses, we need people to make sure that the plumbing works, we need people to make sure that when we have a new astronomy facility like Lowell, there are contractors they can hire from here in town, both because that employs our employees and also because it keeps those costs down for our employers as well. One of the example recently that kind of ties the plans together well is, and I don't believe we've actually talked to you guys about this recently, so a quick note, is workforce development ARPA funding we're using to help provide internship and fellowship opportunities with one of our astronomy and space companies here in town. Catalyst is receiving support because, as was mentioned, WIOA funding is not able to reach the level of creative skill required for those types of astronomy positions. So finding a way to both use the traditional workforce development opportunities that come through the federal funding, but also looking at some of those target sectors, they're not going to necessarily tie into those traditional funding sources. Are there ways, especially since we're hopefully going to be paying off our incubator shortly, are there ways that we can redirect some of those BBB funds to focusing workforce development on our target sectors, while definitely not ignoring the fact that all of those sectors require folks to drive the trucks, to make sure that buildings are built safely, and to bring those trades in. Plus, as you know, a part of business retention and expansion is making sure that we have talent. And if you can't get your deck built, you're not going to stay for long either. So I think that's one way I'd answer it. I'd look to anything you want to add? Good enough.
That's good.
I hope that addressed your question.
It does. I'm also wondering how this ties into, or if it ties into, the work the city's done to establish the Business One-Stop Shop.
This, Mayor, Councilmember, thank you. This does establish into that work. It will build upon it. The Business One-Stop Shop was set up as a resource for businesses. We made it through that phase one. We're still working on getting to phase two, which will continue to bring some of the resources that are developed here into a place where all the businesses can find them themselves. As you heard, one of our actual strategies, which of course my eyes aren't finding right now, is develop a workforce development landing page that includes an overview of local skills training. That will likely live on the Workforce Development Board or somewhere else's, but our Business One-Stop Shop can help be a funnel that makes sure that when businesses come, they can figure out everything from how to get a business license to where they can get workforce development training, get on the list as a training provider, those types of items. So the Business One-Stop Shop program is just the beginning of it, and we'll continue to build in terms of helping make sure that we have one place businesses go when they come into Flagstaff that can help them figure out their training needs as well as the regulatory process and how to get their permits. Hope that's helpful.
Just a few more questions, and one is more serious than the other, but I'm curious, early in the presentation, there was a look at the potential growth and some of the declines in employed populations, and one of them showed a net loss in self-employed population through 2032, and I'm wondering what led to that assessment.
So these are not our projections. These are the states, and they really base it on past trends. If you look at the past trends for Flagstaff and the surrounding area, or all of Coconino County, this really feels like a active, vibrant place. A lot of things are happening. A lot of new types of businesses are starting out. But if you actually look at the numbers, they don't show that in the same way. You haven't had the growth. You haven't had the job growth necessarily. There are some negative economic indicators that we have in our report for a community that has about the highest percentage of of adults with a college degree of any place I've seen anywhere. And so highly educated people really want to be here, but the job growth necessary to have a balanced economy, which is one of the reasons you all commission these plans, may not have been here. I'm the self-employed. I don't know why the state predicts that. One of the fun facts that is in their report that you'll be getting is looking at what people's, highly educated workforce here. How many people have a background in business in a formal 4-year degree type program? Almost nobody. I mean, you got teachers, you got environmental scientists, you have forestry people, you have astronomy people, you have some engineers, but the formal business talent may not be here. And that's one of the things that we point you to as something to watch. And I think it's a good point to the educational institutions as well. A lot of the business talent here is self-taught and maybe come from another background, and you learn either the easy way or probably the hard way about how businesses work and how you're a manager or an owner of a business. But that could be one of the reasons. I don't know. But some of the economic development and workforce development strategies goes exactly to your question about the one-stops. Every worker is benefited by every new company that starts here, and many of your workers want to own their own businesses someday. And are they getting that kind of job experience, and do they have the resources available in the community to be able to do that, whether that's in construction or whether they're going to start the next high-tech company. You're not unlike other communities where that is a life goal of many of the workers here, and being able to be supportive of that is something for you all to look at too.
Thank you very much. And my last question was just, I was looking at the comparisons that were made with Asheville, Bend, and Missoula. And this is kind of a broader question, so I don't necessarily expect that you have a direct answer for it, but I'm wondering why in so many of the case studies that we see that are looking at Flagstaff business development, economic development, housing, like every conversation, we so seldom see comparables that are within the state. It's usually outside, and I'm assuming that that has something to do with the key indicators that are being used, but I'm wondering if there's anything more to that.
Do you want to?
I mean, I was just going to say that, yeah, you're exactly right. It is because of the indicators. There's not a lot of places in Arizona that are anything like Flagstaff, so you can expand on that.
You really, and we had to look at opportunities for success stories outside the state. If you think about Arizona, and these are all strengths of Flagstaff, you're big enough and you're far enough away from Phoenix to be a major regional center for northern Arizona. There's nobody that's competing for you there. That brings a balance to the types of industries and types of jobs that can exist here if people can afford to live here, or if your business can afford to pay the people to be able to afford to live here. So you have that advantage. In Bend and Asheville and Missoula are in similar situations, but there's not a lot of, I have a lot of experience with mountain communities throughout the Intermountain West, and there's only a few. We couldn't find a third, for example, that really fit you as well as Bend and Missoula, and look to Asheville as just as an example from another place. All the pressures because you're a great place to live, and people know that, and they come from outside the community and they buy homes and they live here part of the year. Each one of these other communities have that. It creates a dynamic for the community that is so difficult. Very few other places in Arizona really understand a summer tourism economy as a big city. I mean, these other places do. and being able to provide opportunity and a path forward so you can tell somebody that may be in high school now or is going to NAU or CCC and say, get your degree or get your training, get great work experience, and plan on staying. And each one of these communities has that problem. And it's a problem that if you're in Phoenix, you don't have that conversation. But if you're in Asheville, Bend, or Missoula, or Flagstaff, you're probably having that conversation, trying to convince people, you know, you can stay in this town, you're going to make it, you may not be rich and be able to save as much money as you want, but these are the communities that the city governments in particular have tried to be supportive of all the other players in the community, because the city isn't the Workforce Development Board. The city is not the county. The city isn't the educational institution. It has to play a partnership, and each one of these cities gave us examples of, hey, sitting on the sidelines is never a good option, and we have information in our report about exactly what each one of these cities did.
Heidi? Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council Members, Heidi Hansen, Economic Vitality Director. It's also important to note some of the shows that we've gone to where we've tried to get a Trader Joe's or something like that. While it's very important for us to do comparables to a mountain city, because of the fact that there are a lot of businesses that do not want to actually do the driving and the deliverables that they have to come up to a 7,000-foot location. And then we also have, even when you're looking for airline service, for instance, they don't want to deal with seasonality. They don't want to deal with winter. They don't want to have to worry about if their product's going to spoil and things like that. So one of the things when you are talking about like a Trader Joe's or what have you, for example, that has been one of their biggest things, is that they don't want to always have to deal with the delivering up our hill and things like that. So it's really important for them, which what they did was to compare us, because if you compare us to something different, which has a totally different climate, it's uncomparable. And so I just wanted to throw out, I hope that's a little bit helpful with you, but this is what we hear at some of the shows and the conferences that we've gone to. They do care about seasonality, and they do care about how they have to drive up a shipment and things like that.
Thank you. That was helpful, and as were the other answers to my questions, so thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I know that your study wasn't about housing, but how does our issue or our housing issue affect this study? How is that going to impact it? And then are you looking at ways we could fix that? I'm sorry.
I'm part of your question first. We are not. You have great, smart people working on that. We're aware of that work, but that was not part of this. We just focused on workforce, but we heard a whole lot about housing.
Yep, and just for some context, some of the conversations that we had with folks who are employers or who work in HR or other hiring positions, they had said we have a lot of anecdotes in one of the appendices in which folks talked about how people are on board to come work for Flagstaff, but then they look into housing and they can't find somewhere to live, or employers will get folks that do move here, but then they've got to, within a year, they have to move elsewhere and leave their position because their housing became unsustainable. So there are a fair amount of anecdotes in the appendices that talk about that. So again, we do mention that up front in the report, that's a big thing that needs to be considered in conjunction with workforce development, but again, outside of the scope of this study.
If you don't mind me, sorry, Mayor. If you don't mind me just mentioning that we do, I think the effort to look into how we can support the construction and the trades industry is a part of helping try to bring down some of those costs. As we talk to our housing developers, they do talk about 30% higher construction costs. That's not all just trucking up the hill. That's the fact that they don't have access to subs and labor that some other communities would. So we are hoping that this study helps us to do a better job addressing the construction worker shortage, which I think might help with affordable housing. Additionally, as mentioned, some of the areas that we're looking to go, it's about helping people upskill. And we know that second market pressure is never going to go away. We're never going to not have people who want to live here from other communities. So helping our local residents to compete for that housing by providing higher wage jobs is just one of the strategies. And I know it doesn't bring the cost of housing down necessarily. That's the 10-year housing plan. But hopefully we can help train some construction workers, and hopefully we can help some folks get higher wages so that they can afford to buy their home or to rent here happily. So I just wanted to add those two pieces. Apologies for an interruption, Mayor.
And then my last question, I'm assuming that we're going to be looking at this a couple years down the road, assessing where we are, if we're meeting any goals or whatever, and then do we readjust or do we do anything different?
We'll be taking some of these, as you saw on slide 15, we'll be looking at, I hope you don't mind that I'm flying forward. There are timelines for us to work with here. As also mentioned, most of what we do for workforce development outside of some of the places where we found places that we might be able to help from a slightly different arena, most of that is through our partnerships. And so what we are going to be doing is working with the Workforce Development Board, working with the community college, working with NAU, working with all the different partners that help us and to implement some of these recommendations, to assess how they're going and to look for other opportunities. But yeah, we'll be, I believe the Workforce Development Board is actually going to be doing a study in a short period of time as well. So we'll be building off each other as we go, and we'll be back to council with various programs and recommendations to find ways to assist.
Councilmember Sweet, and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So interestingly, I had a business in Missoula, Montana, while I had one here. So very similar towns, good choice. And the struggles are similar in all three, I would guess. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I think, you know, when you asked why are the businesses declining, cell phone businesses, I mean, I can tell you it's really hard to make the margins anymore. We are getting just hit right and left. And I know we talk about that a lot up here on the dais. And I think that having a formal business group that meets not only with the city, but with NAU and CCC would be a great direction to have honest conversation. So during the water rate study, I've had a lot of conversation with businesses around town. And it's quite honestly, we're all in the same boat. We all have the same concerns. And it's great to bounce ideas and share those. And I think that it's important to have the city, NAU, and CCC involved in that because, I mean, we're kind of at a tipping point here. And I'm just very thankful that we're having this discussion. And I appreciate all your work on this, so thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Councilmember Harris, I really appreciate you bringing up housing. It's clearly an elephant in the room. I think all of these conversations are subservient to the housing puzzle that needs to be solved. I'm hearing that as well. I think we all acknowledge that. I just wanted to state it out loud for my own part. There's another elephant in the room. It's a big one. And I wanted to ask you guys about it because I don't remember it coming up at all. But does any of your analysis here, does it account for the imminent shakeup that AI is going to impose upon the current workforce landscape? You know, and in what ways does a community like Flagstaff, you know, take advantage or suffer from these seismic shifts that are coming? It's kind of an open-ended question, but it's definitely something I didn't want to leave unsaid.
Yeah, so preliminary answer to that is, so our plan builds a lot off of the Economic Strategic Development Plan, which does consider AI and the role of automation in identifying those priority sectors. And so a lot of the jobs that they discuss within that report are are future focused. I think that's the terminology that they use. So our report, while it doesn't directly address the use of AI in these roles, it does sort of indirectly via those priority sectors and some of the jobs that we have included in those tables. Anything else? Good? All right. That's our answer.
Okay, I have a question, and this may be answered in the full report. So just tell me it is, and I'll wait to read that. Can you describe how the roadmaps to achieving our workforce and economic development goals will be achieved? How will you develop specific tactics and goals? So for each of these, it's really interesting, and my mind immediately goes to, oh, we could do X, Y, and Z, and we could. When does that happen? Who's involved with that? And when does it happen? Did I say when twice?
I think it was very clear that you care about the when. So both the strategic plan and the workforce development analysis have specific tasks that need to be addressed. Most of those involve partners or involve next steps, and those happen immediately. Like, this has been a big part of the push, was getting data, concrete data that we could use to know that we were on the right track. As we mentioned when we talked about the economic development strategic plan, there was a lot of things we were already doing. We knew generally our economy, but after so many major changes, we wanted to make sure that we were basing it on empirical data and making sure that we were looking forward in a data-driven fashion. Same with the workforce development analysis. Now we've got the data that shows the direction that we need to be going. The question is how you take these items and bring them down into community action. And that will be your economic development team, but your whole organization as well, and our community workforce partners, as well as our economic development partners. So in terms of who it is, I think it depends a little bit on the activity. There are some of these that could potentially be a city program, but most will be done in partnership with our community partners. And when it comes to both plans, all those, that all starts moving forward now. We actually have an economic development person who you met last week. It's very exciting. Soon we will have two again, and then we can actually be running even faster than we are now. But getting these plans forward builds that framework, which we now can use over the summer and into the fall to start building programming or amending programming. In many cases, we're doing some of this work already, and so it's just a question of tweaking it to fit best practices or to continue as we see as good. Does that help address your question?
It does, thank you. So will the public be able to access this roadmap? So if someone in the community had a question about, well, I wonder what they're doing about whatever, will there be some place that they can look and find information about how whatever that is getting achieved?
Mayor, great question. Both the Economic Development Strategic Plan and the Workforce Development Analysis talked about finding ways to communicate better the services that are already available, and as we develop new ones, that will be a continuing challenge. I think that it will be incumbent on us to make sure that the Choose Flagstaff website, as well as the Business One Stop Shop, and other avenues are used to help develop this pathway. Part of what came out of the Economic Development Strategic Plan was a community process around what sustainable economic development is, how it looks for our community. Those processes will help to develop the pathway, and then making sure that the public can access that pathway has got to be a critical part of it, and we'll make sure that that is a part of it, and we can bring back how that looks to you. I don't know exactly yet.
Thank you. And I think just having Heidi say publicly that they talked to Trader Joe's is good. And let us state for the record, once again, the City Council has never told Trader Joe's that they cannot come here. Let the record reflect.
Your economic development team has heard with great certainty that Trader Joe's is welcome in our community from our policymakers.
Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you. Another question for small businesses. What I hear a lot is, we're different in the 3 cities that you represented. We have a minimum wage that is unique to Flagstaff. Was that into consideration when you did the chart that showed we're declining in our self-employed small businesses?
The short answer to that is yes. So again, as Dave mentioned, those projections were based on the Arizona State, I think it's the Commerce Authority that does those, and so those are based on previous trends. And I believe those don't take into account rather the specific local ordinances. Is that right? Right, they're for the whole county. They are for the whole county, the ones that we presented up there. So, additional thoughts?
I'll take this as an opportunity to make a pitch for, it's very hard to figure out how what the city's role in all of this is. And our previous comments from Nikki and myself kind of got to that. So what can you do? One of probably the biggest things you can do is set the culture. Hey, we're in this together, we know people are hurting, we know we got great educational institutions, but we know some people just can't go through that process, don't have that opportunity, even though, it might be, you can give all the scholarships in the world or make it free, you still gotta eat, you still gotta have housing. And we didn't get this from this group, but we did get into some conversations that, hey, we think that this is a community that doesn't fully appreciate its workers and its businesses that keep the community alive. We're worried about a whole bunch of really great things, but sometimes we forget about our workers, especially our workers without a path through a formal college education. And there are good paying jobs that don't require a college degree that are going to be created in this town, and somebody's going to take them. That person may likely come from Phoenix. There's always wanted to live in Flagstaff because they went through their construction apprenticeship down there. And they got the skills, and now they're going to come up here and have a living wage job that they can stay here. That job went to somebody from outside the community. Same thing as, hey, I want to start a business, I want to become a manager, I want to have that career pathway. Well, maybe that's going to go to somebody else, not from the community. And when people from the community are not going to get those opportunities, then they're going to leave. And that's one of the things that having a real strong statement and leadership, which sometimes the city is in the best position to do, because each one of the other players in the workforce development picture that Dr. Yates described can only do so much. And maybe the missing link is bring everybody together and over a really long sustained period of time, setting the tone that we're going to educate young people in our community, we're going to upskill people that may not be making a living wage in our community. It's up to them, but we're going to provide every opportunity, and we're going to have this conversation all the time because it's so important to the city. And I think that we got enough, as city council and mayor and vice mayor, you would be asking, do people even want us to be players in this? They absolutely do, because they see a void in leadership on these issues in the community, and they're actually looking to the city to provide that. So I wanted to get an opportunity to make that pitch for you. It's more than the website. It's more than, hey, if you have some BBB funds here. It's really setting the tone and the culture of we care about the workers in the community, we care about the businesses in the community, and we really want to support people and families to be able to stay here. And that's as much a part of the conversation as everything else that for some in the community appears to be missing. And so that's something that is difficult to do, but nobody is doing it right now, according to some anyway.
All right. Oh, Councilmember Harris.
Sorry. How do we do that? Give me a couple suggestions. about how do we do that. I think we do, but but evidently people don't, so how do we do that?
Mayor, Councilmember, I admit I was chatting with my boss briefly and I missed the beginning of the question.
Setting the tone, culture, we're all in this together.
Setting
Workers,
the tone, culture,
businesses.
yes, thank you. I apologize for that moment away. I think again, part of our conversation with the strategic plan and this is about how we have this community conversation. You asked earlier how we tie in with Econa's plan as well with the other two plans. Econa's plan talks about trying to create a united vision around how business development can work for our community. One of the ideas that we've talked about with our sustainability division is working together to bring the disparate voices to say what is sustainable economic development. Some of it is going to be about having those conversations and using them to build additional momentum. Also, making sure that people know it can be everything, I think, from that larger conversation, which policymakers are going to be a key part of. Because as was mentioned, and I know you are all great advocates for us, but as was mentioned, sometimes I think the business community feels like other issues take priority over theirs at times. I hear that from time to time. And so having the voice of the city saying that this is an important issue and that we're working on it, making sure that it's a part of the consideration that we have around policies, and making sure that we're doing the work to help bring our partners together. There are already avenues that maybe we can just help enhance and support, but it sounds like a leadership role is for us to dive into. We've been, John Saltonstall, who until recently was our Business Retention and Expansion Manager, was the Vice Chair of the Workforce Development Board for years. We've been involved, but how we use this document, our Economic Development Strategic Plan, our newly reorganized Economic Development Program, and the support of the policymakers here, who are clearly asking for it, to truly lead. There's a number of ways we're going to be able to approach that. I think that community conversation that we can do with Econa and some of the other voices out there is going to be a key piece, but so is making sure that we have good apprenticeship programs here and that they're getting the support they need to get their clients, and that when income eligibility restrictions limit WIOA funding, we have a way to bring those forward. I hope I'm addressing your question. I know there's a number of other strategies up there, and a lot of it's going to be about how we proceed forward.
Mayor, just wanted to add one thing. Councilmember Harris, it's just important to note that on this overall goals and the target population second column, it really kind of answers the fact that we are going to look at all workers. We're not just going to be looking at high wage, low impact businesses and what they can do for us. But we already know, Councilmember Sweet, when we're dealing with the minimum wage businesses, that we have to have these breakout sessions and we have to have these committees, so we talk about that as well. So we think that we're going to be able to do a wide, broad brush on all of this, and we will be coming back in front of you time after time when we have more progress. So no audience is going to be left behind and no population will be left behind. I hope that gives you a little bit more. Okay, Council, any additional questions? All right, I'm going to move to public comment. First up, we have Michelle James.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Michelle James, Executive Director, Friends of Flagstaff's Future. Mayor Daggett, I really appreciate your questions tonight. They hit at some of the things that I'm going to be saying here in my prepared statement. FQ would like to see the city's workforce development plan include additional specific strategies to assist with increasing the childhood support workforce. Likewise, FQ would like to see this document include strategies with a focus on increasing local construction workforce to address infill development, as well as the move to electrical transformation as outlined in the carbon neutrality plan. As an example of building and supporting the child care workforce, the National League of Cities has been working with the City of Phoenix for 4 years to implement something called the Cities Supporting the Early Childhood Workforce Initiative. This initiative is helping local leaders strengthen support for the early childhood workforce in their communities. Phoenix has looked directly to their city workforce and established a cohesive support framework focused upon the needs of young children, their families, and the early childhood workforce. What internal strategies can the city of Flagstaff put in place? The demand for neighborhood infill will be growing in the near future given the preferred alternative of the in-progress draft Regional Plan 2045, of which I'm on that committee. And a rapidly growing demand is already present in the Flagstaff for retrofits of existing buildings to be more energy efficient. A focused workforce is needed for these sectors as well. Cities are able to positively influence the growth of local construction workforce in many ways, including policy and contracting requirements, providing apprenticeship opportunities by requiring a certain number of registered apprentices on government-funded construction projects, and by creating local incentives for builders who provide infill housing and for those who train Flagstaff's residents for the green retrofit workforce. I want to thank you, and I want to let you know that I sent you all an email with additional details and links to these things that I have referenced tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Regina Salas.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I might run out of time because I have some answers to Councilmember Harris's questions. The Arizona at Work Coconino County Workforce Board partners with employers and the workforce development system to develop policies and direct investment to support workforce system strategies and to support regional approaches to including local and regional sector partnerships, career pathways, and high-quality customer-centered service delivery. The City of Workforce Development Strategy work session today marks the beginning of promising collaborations and partnership for our city. I would like to highlight several key aspects that warrant further iteration and consideration. WIOA mandates training and employment services to out-of-school youth, now being marketed by the Department of Labor as Opportunity Youth, adult dislocated workers, veterans, individuals with disabilities, and seniors. We have 10 registered apprenticeships program in Flagstaff. Please include caveat and FUSD for CTE and JTED for pre-apprenticeship. We have over 23 programs in our eligible training provider list. Emphasize work-based learning, OJT, work experience, summer apprenticeships, internships, and pre-internship. Highlight employer-driven incumbent worker training and sector-specific customized training for upskilling, layoff aversion, and workforce reduction prevention and support services. We may not be able to address minimum wage and cost of living and inflation, but we have federal dollars to support every business in town for workforce training to train their current and future workforce. I also want to recognize to include Northern Arizona Good Job Network's blueprint, piloting accelerator training on food service, manufacturing, transportation, and healthcare. And also make sure that the plan iterates and in alignment with the governor's Workforce Arizona Council goals, as well as our state plan and our local plan that is being developed. Additionally, I also want to highlight a low-hanging fruit for partnership, because we at Arizona at Work, Coconino County, are intending to roll out an online referral system to our Atlas kiosks to be placed in public areas such as public libraries.
Pardon me, Councilmember House has a question for you.
Thank you for sharing that information. I was just wondering if you did or if you were willing to email us that same information.
I do, Councilmember Haas, and I would love to do so.
And what was the question that Councilmember Harris had that you had an answer for?
Yes, has something to do with what are the specific tactics and strategies. So the Northern Arizona Good Job Networks that I'm part of, it's sector specific, and it's actually aligned with our evolving goals as Arizona at Work, Coconino Workforce Board. Target opportunity youth, build stackable short-term training programs toward a credential. This means 2 to 8 week programs, industry-led strategies, engagements of employers, and improve coordination of workforce development and economic development programs. So, we're lucky to have Ms. Gail Jackson as vice chair of our workforce board, and we're hoping to have Mr. Dave McIntyre to be officially appointed to serve on our workforce development board. Other tactics include goal number 3 and 4, where there are some opportunities to partner with the city, where our stringent WIOA rules and regulation restrict some of the potential participants for internship and apprenticeship due to eligibility and income requirements. Of course, that needs to be changed in terms of the WIOA law itself. And another point, sorry, Madam Mayor, another creative way of partnership is push the envelope in terms of partnering for housing when it involves workforce training.
Thank you very much. All right, Council, any additional questions or comments? All right.
Thank you.
And Dave, can you remind me when we'll see the full report?
So I'll be sending the full report out tomorrow morning. It potentially could be tonight, it will depend. But potentially tomorrow morning, and then we'll be bringing it back to you for further discussion and potential adoption on July 2nd. I believe they are hoping to have comments back from you, if possible, by June 7th, so that they can get those incorporated in the document. When you receive the document, it's a lot of pages. That's why they mentioned the 12 pages are the actual document itself, and then there's a significant number of appendices, which were pretty fascinating to read, so I hope you get a chance to dive in a little bit.
I need to say something. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, I need to embarrass Dave for a minute. When Dave said that John Saltonstall, our Business Retention Expansion Manager, had left to take a director position at the county, which we are still great partners with John, and Jack Fitchett left to be a director over in Winslow, he has been putting his team back together after we did a reorg, and I want you to know he's been shepherding all of this, plus being the director that he is and working with beautification, arts and science, and parking. So I would be remiss if I don't say thank you, Dave, publicly for just being an amazing City of Flagstaff employee.
Thank you, Heidi.
We all agree with that, for sure. So I'm not done yet.
Sorry, I was blushing, so I was trying to find a place to hide. Thank you, Heidi. That was good.
So when the report is emailed to us, will it be available publicly?
We'll be happy to provide it out publicly. I actually don't have it set up to go live on the city's website yet. I'll work with Sarah Langley and her team to do that. We'll be sending it out to stakeholders and to F-Cubed for sure, as well as anyone else who has expressed interest. And we'll get it out through the city's website as well.
Great. And understanding that this is a draft, and any changes, so council's not going to discuss this again until July 2nd?
That is correct.
So any points that council or the public want to make on it need to be in by June 7th. And would that be to you?
I will be happy to provide those to Keene. If you happen to reach out to Keene directly, you can do that at your leisure. But no, I'd love to grab them and send it in. But the document will have their contact info. I guess I'll look to them.
It does. Yeah, we can receive those comments directly, and the document does have a way to contact us via email.
Great, thank you. Now I'm finished.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We appreciate it.
Okay, moving down to item number 10, informational items, 2 from Mayor, Council. Oh, wait a minute. We moved, to after item number 10. So we're going to do another round of call to the public after item 10. So informational items, 2 from Mayor, Council, and City Manager, future agenda item requests. Let's start with Councilmember House.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things I'll share from last week, since we skipped last week. I had the opportunity and the fun honor of joining Mayor and Councilmember Sweet for a prescribed fire tour on Observatory Mesa. We got to see firsthand and hands-on how that process works. Really impressed with the full scope of planning that goes into that process and the amount of detail that they put into the consideration of not only the area that's going to be burned, but also the surrounding homes, the impact to the community, what to do in case of any sort of mishaps or other incidents, taking care of the people that may be going through that area who aren't aware that the prescribed fire is happening. All of those things are part of a really, really robust plan process that they have, and it was just really impressive to see. I also was able to attend the Multicultural Park Sculpture Exhibit opening reception at the Liz Archuleta County Park. That was 2 Saturdays ago? About a week ago. That was a great exhibit. It was a testament to the work of the city's BPAC Commission, and I think also very representative of former Supervisor Archuleta's vision of cultural engagement that was established in and through the county's Tri-Diversity Councils, the city's Commission on Diversity Awareness, BPAC, all of those things kind of coming together to make that project happen. And then finally, I don't see anyone from PROS here anymore, so I just wanted to, hello. So I was going to raise a point, and I will keep talking until you get down here, Rebecca. There was a letter to the editor, and I understand an email that went out about concerns with the Aquaplex and some concerns about open swim hours and things like that. And one of the comments that I saw publicly on social media was just talking about whether or not these were the sorts of things that rose to council's attention or that we were even aware of. And so I had reached out to Rebecca and Amy and their team to see if they wanted to speak to that. I know that they had a very well-rounded response to that concerned citizen, but I also just wanted to give the opportunity for you to speak to the amount of attention that you do pay to that infrastructure and those sorts of concerns that are raised.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember, for the opportunity to address it. I'll be brief. For those that might not have seen it, the letter to the editor was concerning some pool closures that we've had recently. And we addressed, excuse me, the mayor actually sent us an email from this person last week. We were able to respond to them with some answers directly to their questions, and the letter to the editor looked very similar to the email that came through. So just to let the council know, lifeguard shortage is a thing. It's just like many other of our positions. That's a nationwide shortage. There's just not as much interest in performing those jobs as is the same with many other equipment operators, laborers, types of jobs. last week when this person emailed us, we had just a lot of things collided at once. We had a special event planned, but then we had 4 lifeguards call out sick around that event the day before, the day after. And so we were closed. We were able to scrape together some staff to open for the event, but then had to reclose. We do, if you look at today's employment opportunities or Friday's new openings, we've got head lifeguard, an aquatics half-time benefited position that just opened, as well as regular part-time temporary lifeguards. All of those are posted now. We will take anyone and everyone, especially those that are able to show up at 5:30 in the morning to get the pool open and stay until 8:30 at night. But this is a constant concern and something that we are always working on in terms of recruitment, but that's exactly what happened. We just had too many call out, and we couldn't safely keep people safe in the pool, and that's our top priority. So thank you for that opportunity, and I'm happy if you had other specific questions for me to answer, I can try.
Thank you very much. I did not. I just really wanted to give that opportunity and for the community to hear and know these things do rise to the attention of the council, and they're things that are always very much on your mind as well. So thank you for sharing that, and that's it for me.
Rebecca, I have a question. If someone wanted to get certified to be a lifeguard, where would they do that?
They can contact us.
So they can get certified through you?
Yep. We are happy to help anyone get certified and then bring them onto the payroll.
And there's no charge for that certification?
We pay for the certification, the training. We have in-house trainers. We're doing everything we can to try to get lifeguards on duty.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Councilmember Sweet.
First off, I'm thinking that could be another project that we do, is get certified to be lifeguards. Count me in. I could be there at 5:30. Okay, I had a very busy few days. Councilmember House did touch on a few things. I was able to attend the CDL ribbon cutting out at NAU, and what a fantastic partnership, and it really relates to the discussion that we just had on workforce development. It's great to see that that's here in Flagstaff, and it will definitely be a contribution for our community. I attended the Good Scout Award Luncheon honoring Kim Ott, and I've known Kim back when I went through the Flagstaff Leadership Program, and it was great to be able to honor her. And I believe Council Member Harris, were you there? She was there, and it was just a fantastic honoring. I went to the Mobile Haven neighborhood meeting, and that's also a fantastic community. I just love them so much, and they've been going through some challenges, and I really appreciate our police and our pros and our streets, everyone coming together and helping them tackle their issues. They have a neighborhood barbecue coming up that I believe the mayor and I are going to. I also attended the Coconino Scroll ribbon cutting and tour, and there were a few of us there. And if you haven't been out to the airport, I highly recommend you go and park in the lot. And as you're walking on the sidewalk, you'll see it on the left side, and it gives a history and a lot of the things I didn't know. So that was pretty fantastic. And Councilmember House did touch on the Aquaplex, and I was going to mention that letter to the editor, and thank you for bringing that up. And I really would get certified to lifeguard. Thanks.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Mayor. On Sunday, I attended the dedication of a new mural on an alley just off San Francisco Street. And it was a really interesting event. The mural basically depicts history of Flagstaff, especially the south side, with kind of a focus on the black participation in the early history, which was really interesting. Probably the biggest image on the wall is former Mayor Evans, and she was in attendance. And we were really blessed to have Dom Flemons, who was formerly with the Carolina Chocolate Drops, perform, and he's just amazing. I just thoroughly, even those few minutes that I saw that made the whole day worth it. And I found out something I didn't realize. I had met Don Flemons at the Pickin' in the Pines a few years ago when he was with Carolina Chocolate Drops. But he's from Flagstaff. His family goes back generations. There's 4 generations. That's amazing. There's a picture. He's not, I don't believe he's on the mural, but his father, there's a picture of him in, I think it was like 1953 as a little boy. And it was a very moving experience. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
No fares for me tonight.
Councilmember Harris?
Yeah, first I was going to say, I thought we didn't let children play with fire and drive trucks, but just a little humor there. But it was a great event, Sunday. First of all, the mural has been up for a couple weeks now, I think, and then to have people at the Murdoch Center to just talk and mingle and talk about the history. So that was good, and it's important for us to do that. The other thing that I attended was the lunch for Kim Ott. And Scouting America could not have picked a better person. I think all of us probably have had contact with Kim over the years that she worked, first at the city and then at the university. And so it was a great event, and they raised lots of money. So thank you, Kim. The other thing that I was going to say is city manager. Yes, you. I'm just wondering, what is it that we can do to let our community know that when things like the lifeguard shortage happens, that there are real reasons for that, and that the city really is hurting in terms of employment? Am I just dreaming this, or are we down in a lot of departments?
Mayor, can I respond? Thank you, Councilmember Harris, for the question. That question is addressed in some way, shape, or form every day of the week. We are in many divisions and sections. We're still hurting with our recruitment efforts. I think it's probably, and this is anecdotal, but it's probably more prevalent in the entry-level positions. Council may recall from the last retreat or the one before it, I forget which, but we have totally changed our structure of our pay grades, and in the lower ones have basically become kind of obsolete, with minimum wage and so forth. So even with that, even with the adjustments that we're making in the lower tier wages, we're having some challenges. To the first part of your question, I think it's a really good question. What can we do to inform the community? Let me chat about that with Sarah Langley and others. I think there are many areas in the city where that kind of discussion can occur. I know that the lifeguard thing just happens to be the most recent, but really there are many. Let's wrestle with that one. Thanks.
Because I just think that, if our city doesn't know that we're hurting or that there's an issue, then it's hard for them to understand when things like that happen. But if we know that we have problems hiring people or whatever, maybe we'll be a little more patient. I don't know, I would be if I knew that, so I think I'm not that special. And then the last thing that I wanted to do is make sure that I invite everyone to the Juneteenth celebration on June 15th at the Murdoch Community Center, and we're back there this year, and also the gala on Friday night, awards, dinner, and dancing, so you should come. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Couple points. The sculpture exhibition at the park is temporary, so don't dawdle. Get over there and see it. And there are QR codes on each of the little signs that will tell you more about the art. We were lucky enough to be there at the ribbon cutting where some of the artists were there, and we could hear them talk about their art, which was wonderful. I was able to attend a little event for the NASA Artemis crew. There's an article in the Daily Sun about it, but they were back in the Flagstaff area training for their next round of moon missions, and that is really exciting. And yesterday, I attended the Memorial Day event at Citizens Cemetery, and it was so beautiful, and residents are really appreciative of the opportunity to gather together and discuss people that they've lost and just memorialize veterans in that way. One thing I wanted to say about the fire, I think that council member, or the prescribed burn, I think that Councilmember House did a great job of describing it. I was blown away by the burn plan and just how detailed it was, and also by the partnership. There were firefighters there from the state and from Summit and from the Flagstaff Fire Department. So that kind of partnership and interagency support is pretty phenomenal. Last week, I took a pretty quick, it was just an overnight trip to DC. The National League of Cities asked me to speak on a panel that the Environmental and Energy Study Institute was doing. And the Environmental and Energy Study Institute does a series of briefings for members of Congress as well as their staff. And this one was on, was titled Cities Leading the Way on Nature-Based Solutions to the Climate Crisis. And I was there to talk about the Flagstaff Green Schoolyards initiative. So I flew in, met with NLC, we did the panel, and I flew right out, which is why I wasn't at the Coconino Squirrel the next day. So that's all that I have. City Manager?
Nothing from me, Mayor. Thank you for a very good meeting.
All right, thank you. We are going to take our next round of call to the public, and we have Stephen Young.
Mayor Daggett, Council, I took some notes way before this meeting started. It's an honor to meet you here. However, the things I'm about to say is not going to be very pretty. Black, white, yellow is in a box of crayons. Those are our nationalities. What needs to be done here is surplus those cars for the $100,000 lights. Sell them the surplus cars. Take the lights off those and put them on there. Put that $100,000 towards that number one over there. Make it a homeless, not a homeless, but a campground, because rich people want to camp too. Now, I say to council, become pigmentation blind. You understand what I'm saying? Active physical interaction with your constituents. Get out there and see what actually is going on, instead of flying over the buildings. Have community-sponsored barbecues. Come one, come all. Love is what it's about. I don't see none of it. I was born in 1965 to a mulatto girl in the middle of a cotton field, but I digress. I'm going to say this to you, because apparently it no longer takes a community to raise a child. I am a precocious one. 1 hour after I spoke the last time at this meeting, I was arrested. 1 of 7. I've been also a victim of the city of Flagstaff condemnation. Just compensation. I've done 5,000 hours in the law library. I have a master's degree in religious sciences, theology, and history. My thesis was, what if they did find the bones of Jesus? The things that's going on in my heart, it is fighting me with the utmost to not feel the way that other things want me to feel. I'm a messenger. So I'm going to give y'all this message. There is judges being promoted when in full participation of denial of 1st, 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, and the 14th constitutional amendments, respectively. Changing docket numbers 25 minutes into a hearing. How can an individual sober be unjudiciously treated with condemnation, deliberate indifference? You got a court system that's rampant. Y'all just don't know. You got judges and clerks. I need at least 5 minutes. I'm almost done. Illegal due
I'm
process.
sorry, there's 3 minutes allowed during the open call to public, and your time is up.
Okay. Time is up. Turner versus City of Flagstaff. Municipalities lose immunity on policies, ordinances.
Thank you, sir.
The encampment council have a closed meeting and address Officer C and other officers.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right, we are adjourned.